the legendary Hollywood director. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 676, Game between investors and actors. Please subscribe and vote. The comparisons between several actors, openly or covertly, were mostly emotional effects brought about by dissatisfaction and envy, plus considerations of interests. Why should Depp get 20 million, while we only get a few $100,000? This is the idea of Orlando Bloom and other leading actors. There is only one meaning behind the words: to increase the value. In Disney's concept, in addition to ensuring the captain's role and the audience's image, actors like Orlando are not very good and are used to set off. If a supporting role wants to increase the value, isn't it a mess? As for actress Keira Knightley, before she starred in Pirates of the Caribbean, few people knew her. Her current fame and achievements are mostly built on this series, and the setting is, because this film is too masculine, and it needs a vase to give a little charm, and of course it is not valued by Disney, and it is really annoying to fight for a little money. Disney rarely makes money from the box office, and the pay has always been very high, as long as the online income and expenditure are balanced. Therefore, Disney is willing to be generous, but the production expenses cannot be too high. After all, those who are familiar with Disney know that this company likes the model of not losing money online, making a lot of money offline and with peripherals, and increasing brand influence, but they can't be taken advantage of. They are not stupid enough to let the actors raise their prices. Keep them stable, and have a good talk with Depp's agent first. Robert Iger said lightly in the office of the CEO of Disney. The situation was originally quite good, but because of the initial negligence, it has become more difficult to handle now. However, this shrewd manager still grasped the key point at the first time. As long as he reached an agreement with Johnny Depp, everything else was a small matter, and I believe that the agents of the other few would make the best judgment based on the situation. Also, the only thing that can be negotiated is the basic salary, and the peripheral interests cannot be loosened, even if the pay is more. Disney's largest and most complete profit map, of course, cannot be opened by others. In a mansion in Beverly Hills, Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer of the Pirates of the Caribbean series, was also knocking on the table at home at this moment. The project was delayed, and he was undoubtedly the most affected person. And it greatly damaged the interests of his studio. You know, Disney wanted to accumulate influence for its own theme pirate culture, and it was Jerry who took over and created it successfully. Who would have thought that a publicity tool would become a money-making tool? But the bigger the pie, the more people are jealous. Moreover, Depp was at an awkward age at that time, and his status as an actor was neither up nor down. It was he who helped Depp complete a gorgeous career jump, jumped into the 20 million club, became a box office superstar, and even got an Oscar nomination. Then, what is the reward? In addition to verbal gratitude, he took advantage of the situation to threaten and fight for high pay. Jerry's studio is a co-producer with Disney, and the risk of the project has increased greatly. Jerry Bruckheimer is more worried about the box office failure and the failure to make back the cost than Disney, because he gets the most from the box office share and DVD revenue. Another point is that director Gore Verbinski also gets the basic salary plus the box office share. The actors get more, and the backstage naturally gets less cake, which is a headache. Therefore, he did not want to see such a situation, and Disney's idea was to ensure the influence of offline and peripheral copyrights, and would not deliberately suppress them, because they could negotiate. At most, they would not want any box office money, as long as they could make money from other profit channels. The differences between the two parties were not quite the same. What was even more annoying was that the price was too fierce. If the actors' requirements were really met, the budget for the original continuous shooting would have skyrocketed. What was more depressing was that director Gore Verbinski did not want to take on this series anymore. He did not like the repetition, so the future of this series was even more uncertain. As a producer, the most hated thing was uncertainty. Jerry Bruckheimer closed his eyes and thought for a long time. Finally, he sighed and picked up the phone to call Depp. I have to admit that, Considering the market factors, the captain is really a super plus point anyway, and I can only talk to him according to my temper. Who makes him so valuable? Let's play the emotional card. This eccentric and alternative actor is actually very smart and has a sense of propriety. All the necessary preparations have been made, so Lemon didn't hesitate and went to the agreed place after lunch. In fact, he wanted to delay for a while, gather momentum, and let Fox worry more. But Rupert personally invited him, so he had to go to see him. When he arrived at the club, the manager on duty led him to a private room. Seeing a bald old man standing up from his seat, Lemon took the initiative to step forward and shake hands with him. Looking up, he looked not much different from what he remembered. However, Lemon's impression of this person at that time came from the scandal of wiretapping that made a lot of noise. The whistleblower of the wiretapping incident died at home. Now, Rupert, who is 74 years old, still looks very healthy and has a kind smile. If you don't know him, you must think he is a very friendly person, but you won't expect that he has no bottom line in doing things. Thinking of this, Lemon was quite uneasy. For a long time, except for Harvey, many people who deal with him mostly follow the business rules and easily tear their faces apart, unlike this man who is very daring. If I want your life, I will really want your life. But then again, if someone invites you personally, wouldn't it be more offensive if you don't come? It can be said that when you meet him, you always feel that there is a sense of viciousness under his smile, which may be caused by the stereotype. Who made this guy's cold-faced photo particularly memorable after the wiretapping scandal? He was quite brave to eavesdrop on the royal family in the military. Of course, it was also after the wiretapping scandal that the Murdoch Group's century-old newspaper, The News of the World, which was very important and enough to influence the British election, was suspended, and the Murdoch Group was forced to abandon the plan to acquire Sky TV for $12 billion to supplement the group's strength. Moreover, his personal image suffered a great blow and his stock price shrank. At this time, the wiretapping scandal had already begun to ferment, but the Murdoch Group handled the crisis public relations well. As soon as the matter came up, two senior executives resigned and took the initiative to pass the blame to their subordinates. Unfortunately, once a crisis of trust occurs, countless people will stare at it. Rupert Murdoch would probably lose his composure soon. He probably thought the situation was under control. Lemon sat opposite him. Rupert smiled and told him not to be restrained, and said they were just chatting. Lemon nodded, still paying attention to his sitting posture. It was okay to lower his posture now. After all, the financial resources and resources controlled by this person were not on the same level as Lemon. It was not shameful to admit defeat. Smart people know when to be tough and when to be respectful. Rupert wore glasses and looked at Lemon with a smile, but he was not in a hurry to continue speaking. In occasions like this, the rhythm of the conversation must be with the person with more weight. He stopped talking, and Lemon was also quite quiet. For a moment, there was an inexplicable sense of oppression. After a while, Rupert broke the deadlock with a smile. Lemon, you are 31 years old this year, right? Exactly. You are really young and promising. When I was 30, I was still worried about how to reorganize and optimize the assets of two newspapers with poor sales. Although it was unclear why Rupert said these things, Lemon still did not brag about himself. Instead, he was more careful about his words, fearing that he would be set up. His steadiness made Rupert look up to him. The more people you come into contact with suddenly successful people, the more you know that not everyone is not affected by their current wealth and status. It is easier to deal with such a person who is very arrogant, so just praise him more. After this test, Rupert suddenly said, the film Sparta produced by Firefly with a budget of more than 60 million should have started shooting. Yes, it has been filming for a few days. How is the release date arranged? If everything goes well, it is tentatively scheduled to be released around Christmas. Oh, why not show it during the Christmas period? This is a good question. It is because the cinema resources are insufficient that they can only show it earlier or later to avoid your trump cards. Lemon thought secretly. Of course, since Rupert asked this question, he naturally knew that Firefly's distribution capacity was insufficient, and he leisurely threw out a chip. Chapter 677 Old Fox. Subscribe, vote. Or, let Fox be the agent for the distribution of Sparta. We can vacate the Christmas season. How about that? It just so happened that the company had not arranged any good projects to compete with other companies at the end of this year, and the investment of more than 60 million yuan in the work directed by Zack Snyder should be worth a bet. After listening to this, Lemon's heart was like thousands of grass mud horses rolling through. You don't play by the rules. What's the matter? Aren't we discussing the TV series Breaking Bad? How did it get to the movie and help with the distribution? Oh, it's not called help, it's called mutual benefit and win-win. And the Christmas season is indeed more eye-catching. As we all know, in a year, the two best periods for movies to make money, except for the summer vacation, are the Christmas market with the broadest foundation. In fact, more than 70% of the works on the North American rankings have accumulated box office revenue during these two periods. Now, Fox has taken the initiative to propose it, which still feels wonderful and has a bright future. But Lemon's idea is that according to the biggest advantage he needs to accumulate at present, that is, to deeply operate the North American channel, and he cannot always take good projects to follow the 6 major companies without paying a price, this channel will never be able to grow. Now it seems that the loss is not small, but in the long run, it is definitely worth it. This approach is actually like Lionsgate in 2007 and 2008. Biting the bullet and smashing its own trump card project, getting results and data, and gathering more and more theater resources. But what excuse should be found to reject Rupert? At this stage, the Murdoch Group is still in its heyday. Many media and news resources under its umbrella also give them enough platforms to speak out. Or in other words, if Lemon wants to spend money to buy space to promote movies in the future, he cannot offend him. This guy is a man of his word. He dares to dig and disclose the privacy of the British royal family just to attract traffic. Rupert's philosophy of running a newspaper is very businessman. He reports whatever topics are valuable, and he does not hesitate to deliberately exaggerate and guide. His characteristic is to say something ambiguous that seems to be true. Well, the notorious newspapers such as the New York Post, the Sun-Times, the Boston Herald, and the World News Weekly are all owned by the Murdoch Group. Those who understand its style know it. So, we can only use the tactic of delaying. Anyway, don't agree first and just be vague. Haha, if possible, it would be great for Fox to be the agent for the distribution of Sparta, but the company has not yet reached a unified arrangement for Sparta. Some people think that, if it is released at the end of the year, there are still some concerns. After Lemon finished speaking, Rupert was silent for a while and said with regret, in this case, let's talk about it later. But about Breaking Bad, we have always had a pleasant cooperation, so what concerns does Firefly have? You might as well speak boldly and say anything. You can find a good excuse to explain why you are hesitant to renew the contract for Breaking Bad. Of course, this matter cannot be said openly. Want to use chips to raise the price and strive for benefits. Which of the two parties does not know? Whoever gives in first will lose the upper hand at the negotiation table. Rupert is a man who came from Sydney just to play this trick. With a casual blow, he made Lemon speechless. Lemon also knew why he mentioned Sparta first. After rejecting the first time, could he reject the second time in the same way? It turned out that this was the trap. What should he do? Lemon's delay strategy that has always worked for him was broken. For a moment, he wanted to curse. But, putting aside whether to curse or not, Lemon quickly calculated in his mind. In this era of interests and status, it is not difficult to say that you can chase negotiations with bargaining chips. Think about it, even actors dare to hijack projects and make various capitalists headache. What's wrong with Firefly raising the price? Dare to mention it, at least there is corresponding confidence and value. Lemon weighed it over and over again, pretending to be puzzled and said, there is something I want to ask you to clear up. What? Is Fox satisfied with the broadcast agreement we signed? Of course, this is agreed upon by both parties. Rupert smiled and understood what Lemon meant, since it was negotiated, or a letter of intent. The buyer did not make an offer, and waited for the seller to make an offer. Is that embarrassing? Rupert laughed in his heart, slowly picked up the coffee pot to refill himself, and then poured another for Lemon. Speaking of which, when the series was piloted, it was different from your confident request for advertising tiered share at that time. As a human being, it is inevitable that there will be times when you make miscalculations. Lemon raised his hand indifferently. Of course, the subsequent trend is stable, and there will be a wave of explosions at the end, which is also difficult to know in advance. Sorry, I'm cheating. And, if I remember correctly, the average viewership of the last episode was more than 17 million. Well, the advertising share of Firefly alone is more than 20 million. Firefly made money, Fox will only make more, and talking about other things is useless for this negotiation. You know, according to Lemon's conservative estimate, Breaking Bad not only brought Fox more than 70 million in advertising revenue, but also the subsequent TV reruns, the cultivation of the audience group, and the ratings of at least 2 programs in the same time period were all raised. These hidden wealth are equally important to a TV station, and the value and profit generated by these have nothing to do with Firefly, and not all of them were eaten by Fox. Speaking of it, is this business worth doing? Rupert really not sure. He certainly knows, otherwise he would not have met with Lemon. First, there is some curiosity and wooing, and second, Breaking Bad has outstanding potential. It is a rare American TV series with high reputation and high ratings in the past 2 years. What such an American TV series means to the TV station, he knows better than Lemon. Rupert picked up the coffee and took a sip with some understanding and realized that Lemon wanted to talk. The purpose was to increase the income from the project share. If he continued to chat with the other party in a bland way, he would probably not get a positive response. Putting down the coffee cup, Rupert decided to get straight to the point. How about this? Fox can raise the advertising share of Firefly to 40%, but this is the advertising share of the entire subsequent project. In addition, the copyright broadcast fee will be negotiated season by season. Based on the market and ratings, Fox is willing to buy the second season of Breaking Bad for $3.5 million per episode. How about it? As long as they can hold the Breaking Bad project, Rupert believes that Fox TV can bring them very good topics and influence with this highly acclaimed hit drama. As for the advertising share, for the TV station, Firefly only gets a part of it, and it is a project. Fox has this part of the demand all day and all year round, and the cultivation of the audience is what they value most. With an audience base, are you still worried about not making money? After listening to Rupert's conditions, Lemon felt relieved. According to the cooperation between the general producers and the TV stations, this share ratio is quite sincere, which also indirectly proves Fox's attitude. Even film and television giants such as MGM and Warner, before they have their own TV networks, can enjoy advertising share treatment, which is difficult to exceed 40% at most, and the TV series are almost, even 30%. Is in jeopardy. Of course, if it is self-produced and self-sold, or the TV station has a lot of rights and interests in the project production, that is another calculation, and it is not uncommon to make a high share with negative profits. However, Lemon still does not want to be determined. This drama has just started, and the future achievements will only be greater. 20 million people are not the end, so there is no need to rush to give all the chips out for money. In fact, the most favorable contract for Firefly is 1 season per contract. There is more room for maneuvering and transfer, and the initiative will always be in hand, forcing Fox to continuously pay out profits. The second season has not even started yet. It's too far ahead to talk about it. It's not good. Let's just talk about the second season. Rupert smiled. He was also a decisive person. Although Lemon's method of retaining the price increase method made him a little unhappy, it was just a normal business transaction after all. There was no hatred between the two parties. He was not a madman who would treat a partner in interest as an enemy for no reason. After a while, he said, "Okay, it's right to think carefully." Then, the offer price remains unchanged, but if the subsequent ratings fall below 5, the advertising share will only be 20%. Do you still agree? The project is not good, and I definitely don't mean to take more. The tone was still affirmative. Chapter 678, New Forces, Abundant Talents. Please subscribe and vote. In this regard, if it is agreed verbally first, the follow-up work will be simple. Lemon and Rupert continued to chat for a while, and then took the initiative to say goodbye and leave. Just as he was about to leave, he was stopped before he took 2 steps. Rupert suddenly said, "For this place, we are all outsiders, and we should stick together for warmth." Lemon thought about it and replied, "Just try your best. You even changed your nationality just to embrace America and prevent yourself from mastering too many media resources and being taboo by the authorities. Why do you still say these things?" Rupert nodded calmly and said nothing more. So Lemon left with a forehead full of question marks. In fact, this is just Rupert's feeling. It's not a conspiracy theory. The wiretapping scandal was certainly committed by the Murdoch Group itself, but after years of hype and guidance, no one really made an effort to promote it. You know, which newspaper has not done anything to violate privacy? If you want exclusive news, do you really treat valuable and explosive news as falling from the sky without some means? What Lemon didn't know was that after he left, Rupert's personal assistant walked in from behind the door of the private room. Having followed Rupert for many years, this assistant must have the ability to read people's expressions. Seeing his boss in deep thought, and mentioning that Sparta had not been made, he took the initiative to ask, "So, he doesn't seem to want to get close to us, and doesn't even want to accept any extra intimacy." Lemon thought he had concealed his position and persistence when talking to Rupert, but he was defenseless in front of these 2 old foxes. Rupert did not comment, and said calmly, "It should be half. He doesn't want to be too close, nor does he want to be too far away. It's normal for him to do this. Even Paramount and Warner didn't recruit him. Fox has a lower background and shallower connections. What can he use to impress?" However, I remember that in addition to his good vision for film and television projects, he is also good at discovering talents. Christopher Nolan, James Wan, Zack Snyder and many others can be mentioned. Is he good at identifying people or training them? In this regard, nowadays, Murdoch Group focuses largely on TV networks and studios, because this is a direction where the best media resources are sinking. In recent years, Rupert found out after a little calculation that several new forces under Firefly seemed to have suddenly emerged. Christopher Nolan made his debut with a low budget, and his performance was neither outstanding nor bad, and he looked ordinary. Then Batman Begins helped Warner successfully transform his Batman image. Zack Snyder, needless to say, made his debut with a music video and made commercials, and his first movie was very popular. And James Wan, his market performance may not be that great, but his cost budget was so well controlled that his profit margin seemed a bit exaggerated, and horror movies cannot be compared with mainstream commercials. So Firefly is full of talents. Unfortunately, they cannot be poached, because that kind of profit sharing means too much trouble for top studios like Fox. Once such a precedent is set, other directors will ask for a share, which is not a problem involving 1 or 2 people, but will shake the entire cooperation structure. In comparison, small studios don't have so many concerns. After all, strictly speaking, Firefly has only one voice, as long as Lemon agrees, but Fox also has to consider the ideas of other shareholders. Rupert shook his head and said, "It's no use thinking too much. Let's focus on the 2nd season of Breaking Bad first." A few days later, Fox reached a contract with Firefly to renew the copyright for the 2nd season of Breaking Bad. As soon as the contract was officially signed, Fox TV could not wait to use the media platform of News Corporation to announce the news of the renewal of the season, and also stated that it would meet the audience in early May next year. As soon as the report came out, the happiest people were of course the many fans who wanted to follow the show. Of course, they didn't care about which TV station Breaking Bad would be broadcast on, but whether it could continue to be filmed. As long as there is something to watch, it's fine. After all, the foreshadowing of the transaction between the white powder combination and Arhen at the end of the 1st season and the subsequent developments are still very interesting and exciting. As August came, Blue Butterfly soon made new moves. This time, it was no longer to use the source of poor quality to make up for the number, but the distribution of Little Miss Sunshine. The August schedule is naturally relatively cold, and there will be no blockbusters. Therefore, Blue Butterfly Pictures quickly reached a consensus with several cinema chains to release the film in North America on Wednesday, August 9th, with an initial number of 1,850 screens and a 23% share of the film's schedule. The approaching release date also involved some of Lyman's energy, planning the premiere, sending invitations, finding people to support the film, and notifying the media to give red envelopes to let them be lenient. These all need to be arranged in advance. As for publicity and promotion, it is never enough to arrange the cinemas. Publicity should not be ignored. In this era of good wine needs no bush, if you don't create popularity and rely on audiences, it will obviously take time. In my memory, before the word of mouth of Little Miss Sunshine and the original Time and Space was not popular, what was the hotspot of the searchlight? Was it the actors? No. What's good about a few unknown actors? The audience doesn't know them. Is it the screenwriter or director? No. A few newcomers in the industry don't have a fan base, and investing resources in them can't play a driving role. What is it? It was Searchlight that paid $10 million for the distribution rights of the film, creating a new high for the bidding price of independent film copyrights, higher than Reservoir Dogs and The Ice Storm, which aroused the curiosity of some audiences. Everyone wanted to know whether the film was really worth the price, or what charm it had that could impress the executives of the studio. Yes, this unique way of hype is limited to Little Miss Sunshine. Other films cannot copy it. First, it is not an independent production, but a film that relies on the production of the studio. The relationship between the two is different. Don't treat the media and the audience as fools. Second, Little Miss Sunshine is indeed well made. At this time, Blue Butterfly will definitely not go this way. Because Firefly paid for Little Miss Sunshine, it is not an independent production. And from the perspective of the distributor, it is reasonable to find a topic to hype. Because if there is no point that can attract or impress the audience, why should they pay attention to your upcoming movie? Without understanding, there is no motivation. This is just like many artists like to set up their own personas, and this kind of topic focus is what the film needs. In other words, before the movie is released, the audience knows nothing. At this time, a film character is needed to guide the audience, to generate curiosity or motivation, to go to the cinema to support it. Some people will say, after the movie is released, can't we directly hype the reputation? This is of course good, and it is also the advantage of Little Miss Sunshine, but the pre-release warm-up is equally important. Think about what the focus of publicity is before and after the release, and you will know that the pre-release publicity requires much more money and energy than the post-release publicity. One is proactive, and the other is following the trend. Which one is easy to compare? So, Lyman can only focus on his boss to find the explosive point for the early promotion of Little Miss Sunshine. Well, that is, Lyman's nominal producer came in handy. What better publicity point is there than Lyman's optimistic about Little Miss Sunshine? The audience really doesn't know the main creators of the show. This is a fact, and it's not shameful. Everyone has a time when they are not famous, but they know Lyman. With the reputation and expectations accumulated over the years, it is easy to attract the attention of the audience, as long as Lyman's name is brought. For example, the promotional copy reads, "Shocking, Little Miss Sunshine released on August 9th is actually a project that Lyman personally values." What? With Lyman's personal approval, the main creators shot a family comedy with tears and laughter, highly recommended. In this way, didn't the topic and popularity come out? Sometimes, writing is really an excellent direction. Spielberg also took the initiative to support his directors. Lyman can certainly learn and apply it in this way. Who lets Lyman have a certain appeal in front of the audience? It would be a waste if it is not used. To put it bluntly, Lyman's reputation alone is higher than the entire Little Miss Sunshine team combined. Fame is so important in Hollywood. This is why Lyman is close to film festivals such as the Oscars and Cannes, because awards can bring what directors need, prestige and qualifications. Chapter 679 Little Miss Sunshine. For more, please subscribe. A red carpet of more than 10 meters was laid at the entrance of the theater. Lyman watched his subordinates arrange the scene in an orderly manner, and chatted with the theater manager nearby from time to time. At about 4 p.m., the invited fans also arrived. Most of these people are professionals in this field, with high quality, and can ensure that the entrance will not fall into a cold scene or the embarrassing scene of guests walking on the red carpet and no one responding below will occur. Of course, this guarantee is mainly for the actors of Little Miss Sunshine, who are behind the scenes and do not need any fans to cheer. As time passed, the behavior of the professional fan team holding cheering signs gradually attracted other passers-by or real fans who got the news and rushed to participate. It soon formed a scale and looked quite good. Wait until the invited media are in place and prepare to end in advance. Abigail Breslin felt very excited and inexplicably from the moment she stepped out of the car door. The screams accompanied by flashes made her subconsciously pose, which was taught by her mother. But in fact, if the little girl listened carefully, she would find that the focus of those shouting was not on her. Hollywood has no shortage of child stars, and Abigail Breslin is not famous enough for everyone to pay attention to her. And tonight's stage is actually for big name actors who have worked with Lyman. For example, Nicolas Cage, Kate Beckinsale, Matthew McConaughey, etc. But for some people in the industry, their focus is on the sudden appearance of Fox executives. After entering the hall, someone asked, "This is a Firefly project, why is Fox here?" You forgot that the two companies just reached a broadcasting rights agreement for the second season of Breaking Bad some time ago. I see. The man suddenly realized. About half an hour later, the audience entered the venue, and after the interactive session, the feature film could be shown immediately. In the front row of seats, Lemon sat next to Lyman. As the fireflies danced lightly and the blue butterflies entered the light spots, the scene opened with a yellow minibus driving on the road. The continuous landscape shots of more than 10 seconds with the blessing of soothing dubbing made people feel very relaxed. After the opening, in a small house, the little girl Olive with a protruding belly was imitating the expressions and body movements of the winners of the beauty pageant on TV. Her eyes were full of desire, as if she saw herself standing on the podium and receiving countless praises. Afterwards, the successive appearances of the leading actors quickly let the audience know what kind of movie this was. Just like Olive, she is not the only one in her family who dreams of becoming famous overnight. Dad Charlie is a person who likes to sell success theory. He has summarized a set of theories called 9 Steps to Success and firmly believes that he can make a lot of money with this instead of giving speeches every day, but no one listens. Brother Dewey, who is in high school, admires Nietzsche very much. He feels that no one around him really understands him, including his family. He exercises every day because he wants to become a pilot, soar into the sky, and leave this family that makes him hate him. In order to urge himself, he even swore a dumb oath that he would not speak unless he became a pilot. For this reason, he has not spoken for 9 months and communicates by writing with sticky notes. The one who supports the dreams of these 3 people is the hard-working mother Shirley. Shirley, who has been divorced once, cherishes her current family life and worries about the trivial matters of this family every day. In addition, there are 2 troublesome members in the family. One is the grandfather who was kicked out of the nursing home because of drug use, and the other is Frank Shirley's younger brother, who was blocked in both career and love and failed to commit suicide for the boy he likes. After a daily routine, Olive signed up for Little Miss Sunshine and received a response to the competition, and she was obsessed with participating. Although her family members supported her, no one took the children's beauty pageant seriously. Only her grandfather helped Olive rehearse the program. Because the air tickets were too expensive, and Charlie and Shirley were worried about the 3 problematic people, old, middle-aged, and young, being together. Fortunately, the whole family went out together. In this way, the cheerful music sounded, and the family drove a somewhat shabby yellow minibus all the way to California. But this journey was not smooth. Mixed with jokes, Charlie's success theory was stuck by the publishing house and could not be published. For this, he had already invested a lot of money. The agent who communicated with him about the book suddenly could not be contacted. As for the breakdown and gearbox failure, the car could only be pushed by manpower and could only start at a certain speed. The grandfather's dirty jokes and complaints were even more funny. On the way, when his brother Dewey accidentally discovered that he was colorblind, and could never be a pilot. He was even more uncomfortable and hit his head against the car window, and also said the first word in 9 months. Fuck. There was also a time when Frank saw his favorite person sitting in the car of his academic competitor in the supermarket and going on a trip together. The ambiguity also made him lose his soul. The sad atmosphere permeated the car. Olive, who was affected, suddenly asked her grandfather unconfidently when she was sleeping in the hotel, "Am I beautiful?" Grandpa was stunned for a moment and answered very seriously, "Olive, you are the most beautiful girl in the world. You are just saying it." "No." Grandpa immediately denied. "I love you not because you are well behaved and smart, but because you are the most beautiful, both inside and outside." After saying that, he poked Olive's belly. "But Grandpa, I don't want to be a loser." Olive suddenly choked up, pouted her little mouth, and her eyes were red. "No, you are not a loser. Why do you think you are a loser?" Grandpa shook his head and asked. "Because Dad hates losers the most. I don't want to disappoint Dad." "But Olive, do you know what a loser is?" Grandpa said seriously. "The real loser is the one who is so afraid of not being successful that he doesn't even want to try. You are trying hard to be a beauty pageant champion, right?" Olive nodded. "Then you are not a loser. So, be happy tomorrow, okay?" Olive's mood calmed down and smiled at Grandpa. Then the next day, Grandpa never woke up again because of drug overdose. In the hospital, the person in charge did not agree to Charlie's body being temporarily stored in the hospital without paying the body management fee. The group had no choice but to work together to move Grandpa's body from the window of the room to the trunk of the minibus, preparing to go home directly after participating in the competition. They didn't care about Olive's program preparation. Looking at the little girls on the stage, who were dressed more seductively and professionally than each other, Shirley was very worried that her daughter would be hit, so she thought of withdrawing from the competition. But Olive insisted on participating. On the stage, when the black hip-hop music sounded, Olive was dressed tightly, but she danced a striptease. She danced so seriously and tried hard to get into the role, but the audience booed and left one after another. Even the host wanted to go on stage to pull Olive off. Charlie was very angry at the host's behavior and wrestled with him angrily, and the whole beauty pageant scene was completely in chaos. Olive stood on the stage awkwardly and seemed to not know what to do. Her small figure was very helpless. At this time, Charlie stood up again. In order to protect Olive, he took the initiative to start dancing, shaking his body constantly, and signaled Olive that she danced very well and could continue. Olive danced actively again, and then Frank and brother Dewey joined in. Finally, Mother Shirley also started dancing awkwardly. Although it was awkward, they were very happy. This is the feeling of a family. Then, the police came. Olive naturally could not win the beauty pageant championship. Even the organizers of Little Miss Sunshine blacklisted her, and she could not participate in the competition in the future. But it doesn't matter anymore. The whole journey was of great significance to the family. They worked together to push the yellow minibus, recognized their confusion, found the direction, and were still accompanied by their closest relatives. They laughed and discussed, heading towards the sunset in the road ahead, and set off to go home. Perhaps, as my grandfather cursed, "Go to hell and live your life, and other people's ridicule is rubbish. I will stop updating tomorrow. Also, I'm just a small person who cannot decide any dispute until the dust settles. But small people also have small people's judgment. That's all." Chapter 680. Warmth, subscriptions, vote. The executives of Fox did not come to support the event on their own, but were invited by Blue Butterfly Pictures. The purpose was to carry out the subsequent publicity work. After the preheating was effective, Lemon's title as a producer was also enough to attract attention, but after the release, the approach had to change again. According to the previously formulated publicity and promotion plan, the enthusiasm of some people to watch the movie was stimulated. The next step was to buy them off. Oh no, the payment of the fee was in place, and the film critics and online water army were praised at the same time. Dozens of soft articles were paved for word of mouth. Are you afraid that the movie will not be popular? After all, even A Certain Fortress was praised after its release. Do you think it is not the case in North America? How to use resources. To seek benefits is something that everyone knows. Moreover, praising Little Miss Sunshine at least has something to praise, which is much better than being slapped in the face by the audience. It is not too hard to collect this money. Therefore, Fox tilted a little more media resources, and Blue Butterfly exerted its strength online, and the momentum was quickly directed in another direction. The next day was the day when the film was released. After the advanced screening of Little Miss Sunshine, many newspapers and magazines, such as The New Yorker and The Hollywood Reporter, published film reviews in their film columns. Among the many films released this year, Little Miss Sunshine is the most refreshing. It is like a person who gives a middle finger to the values of talent shows and reveals the essence of child beauty pageants. At first glance, it makes people laugh. If you don't consider other things, it is also qualified as a comedy, but I always feel a little sad at the end. Perhaps, the characters in it are very similar to those unhappy lives in reality. The title contains the word sunshine, but the story is not sunny. None of the people in it are winners in life. Those who work hard for their dreams are abandoned by their dreams first. It can be said that the plot is a bit dark. They are all losers in the literal sense, but losers can also be warm. Although the ending is not so happy, the process is sweet in the bitterness. Very sweet. That afternoon, in a movie theater in downtown New York, Kate, who was attracted by soft articles, made an appointment with her friends to watch the well-received Little Miss Sunshine. Wow, there are so many people. After finding that there were so many people queuing, Kate complained, on holidays, even the cinema has to queue up. I think that maybe the movies are good, so people come. Look. The friend pointed to the poster column and said with some expectation, the first theater has Talladega Nights, the second theater has the animated film Farm, and the recently well-received Little Miss Sunshine is in the third theater. Although there are no big movies in the recent schedule, some movies are also outstanding. For example, Talladega Nights, a sports comedy about racing, premiered on August 4th. And won $47.04 million in the first weekend. Compared with the expenditure cost of $73 million, it is a good box office performance at the beginning. It is estimated that Columbia can make a profit. As for Farm, it was produced by David Andrews, a special effects expert in the first 3 parts of the Harry Potter series, and distributed by Paramount. The performance of $15.82 million in the first week was not outstanding, but of course, it would not be a big loss. Then, the 2 bought tickets and entered the third theater. After more than 110 minutes, I walked out with some feelings. Little Miss Sunshine doesn't have any big scenes, and the cast is not the idol celebrities that everyone pays attention to most. But seeing such a work that is close to reality, has some humor, and is also ironic, and can be seen from the characters that are more in line with life, I still approve of it. What's more, how many people in this world can always be winners in life? On the road of life that keeps moving forward, all kinds of troubles, problems, and difficulties will naturally arise. In those days of regret, miss, and failure, a deep sense of substitution suddenly appeared in the hearts of these people. Dewey, who couldn't be a pilot because of color blindness, Frank, who committed suicide after a broken heart, and Olive, who became a source of embarrassment after the beauty pageant. These characters have the shadow of similar misfortunes that many people have experienced before, a microcosm of the past, and this kind of daily style plot can make the audience sympathize. Movies, either cool enough to arouse expectations, or resonate, or satisfy visual senses. These 3 categories are what the audience is willing to buy, and Little Miss Sunshine takes the path of resonating. Of course, if the movie is purely realistic, the plot is too boring, because real life is always boring. So everyone needs spiritual tonics, games, movies, TV, comics. They are all products that satisfy the spiritual world. Therefore, Little Miss Sunshine adds comedy element, especially the grandfather's dirty jokes and dirty jokes that can make the audience happy. These jokes make the plot smooth and are another key to the success of the film. Then, it is warmth. The main line of the beauty pageant is terrible on the outside, but it is full of warmth on the inside. The family supports Olive's dream and rushes to California from afar. They experience all kinds of troubles on the way and still help Olive stand on the stage. Although the spoof irony chose striptease as the performance program of the children's beauty pageant, looking at those little girls who put on heavy makeup early and show their talents under the leadership of their parents, who has not become a victim of their parents' pursuit of fame and fortune, so it seems that Olive's striptease performance is the most simple and serious. When she was kicked off the stage by the host, her father stepped forward to stop her and danced with her, giving her confidence, and even the whole family went up to dance. This kind of warmth is very recognizable to the audience, although the lack of tension in the film's plot is definitely a shortcoming, and there are no big scenes, which are not attractive enough. For most viewers who have watched the movie, they are willing to support it. There are no complicated editing and shooting techniques, nor are there any eye-catching settings. There are only funny ironies of beauty pageants and interpretations of family warmth, companionship. It is precisely this kind of movie watching meaning that can make the audience have the idea of Amway and share the film, thereby causing a positive word of mouth effect. The internet is also a place where you can see this change in real time. The first part was all hyped up by the online publicity and public relations departments of Blue Butterfly Pictures. They didn't need to continue to guide them. Some viewers who had watched the film spontaneously left messages on forums or websites with large traffic such as IMDb to promote it. It's really a good movie. Everyone must go and see it. Olive is such a cute little girl. I really want to poke that little belly. Although Grandpa is usually not serious, he is the one who encourages Olive to participate in the competition. The conversation in the hotel was quite touching. Recommend. Highly recommend. Under the guidance of the online publicity and public relations departments and the spontaneous recommendation of the audience, similar messages or posts appeared in discussions on many websites. For the audience, after watching the movie, as long as they really accept a movie, in this era, where everyone is a film critic, the free way to speak, and the improvement of the channels of accommodation also make them not stingy to contribute to the promotion of the film. The internet is really changing the world. And if the audience can be satisfied after watching it, will the box office still be low? This momentum is much more useful than the original hype of the first independent production buyout and distribution fee. Of course, it could also be that Fox didn't take the film seriously at first, and it wasn't until the box office increased in the second week that it realized that its subsidiary brand Searchlight seemed to have discovered a low-cost dark horse, and then it made a big effort. This kind of miscalculation of the film's prospects can be said to be encountered by every film company. Sometimes the expectations are too high, and sometimes there are no expectations at all. It is precisely because of the unpredictability of the market after the film is released that so many dark horses or screen classics or the ultimate flops that cause the company's capital chain to break and go bankrupt were born. Who knows until the moment when the market results come out. However, Blue Butterfly's resources for this film are relatively good, and the film is worthy of Lyman's attention or the company's resource support. The more than 15 million publicity expenses, which are higher than the funds for the film production, are not wasted. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 681 Audience Feedback. Subscribe, vote. Boss, the data feedback has been sent over there. While the related works of Hypesoft articles and network promotion continued to ferment, the staff of the data group of the market department of Blue Butterfly Pictures had also received the statistical report of the survey company. Looking at the field sampling results of dozens of cities and more than 500 theaters, Lyman and Lyman both showed interest. In other words, this report brings the subsequent publicity direction of the film and the control and estimation of the box office performance. Lyman raised his hand to signal, and the young employee who reported the news immediately said, "The number of interviewed audiences is 5,360, of which 62% are male and 38% are female." 72% are over 25 and under 45 years old, 20% are under 25 and over 16 years old, and the remaining low age groups and people over 45 years old are only 8%. In addition, the audience satisfaction exceeds 83%. And 64% give A ratings. For the means of statistical audience satisfaction and population distribution after the official screening of the movie, it is considered a thing that most film and television companies will do. Although this kind of data is not comprehensive, it can help us understand what age group of audiences like to watch our films and their real-time evaluation after watching them. This is very beneficial for subsequent screenings. For example, if the reputation is too bad and the satisfaction is too low, we can be prepared to reduce investment. Or if the resources are not matched with the screening market, we need to increase the stakes. And all of these can be seen from the results of the sample survey. Take Little Miss Sunshine for example. Children and elderly people are obviously not the target audience, and the female market accounts for a good proportion, nearly 40%, which shows that it is really attractive to female audiences. Generally speaking, the ratio of men to women in most films is close to 73, or even lower. Then there is satisfaction, because it represents the most real reflection of the market, not the self-promotion of the film company for the sake of hype. Such a summary result is obviously very convincing. In other words, if even the audience who bought tickets to enter the venue are all one-sided bad reviews, the media and the internet are blown loudly, and all kinds of film critics say that the film is unprecedented and wonderful, it will still not be successful. Many times, the most fundamental reason for a movie to fail is that the audience doesn't like to watch it, and this has little impact on whether the film is well made. Subject matter, content, plot, schedule. There are many things that can affect the box office, but only the most authentic feedback from the audience can reveal the essence of the follow-up. Obviously, the more than 80% satisfaction rate of Little Miss Sunshine made Lyman breathe a sigh of relief. Although he believes in Lemon's vision, he can't help but worry if the market doesn't respond. What do these good reviews mean? It means that young and middle-aged audiences, that is, the future target group of the film, have a good impression of the film. It means that this satisfaction is outstanding in the field of family comedy, and there will definitely be gains. This is like the money bags are willing to pay the bill, then the box office will definitely not be bad. As for the dissatisfied audience, it is not within the consideration of Blue Butterfly Pictures. After all, no movie can please everyone. If you don't like to watch it, of course there are reasons for not liking it, and it can't be forced. We just need most of the audience to recognize it, and the minority who are looking forward to the next work will try to serve it well. Therefore, Lyman was very happy with the offline feedback of the film, and immediately formulated a new promotion plan based on the age group of the audience. Time always flies when you are busy. Not long after Lyman returned home, he sat in the study and thought about this year's project production. Soon, the box office statistics for the first day of the release came out. After hanging up the phone, he opened the computer mailbox. Lyman locked on a number, 10.42 million. Compared with the start of 1 or 2 million in the previous life, it is undoubtedly a huge leap, but compared with mainstream commercial blockbusters, it is definitely slightly insufficient. However, I'm also very satisfied. The cost of Little Miss Sunshine includes the publicity expenses that have been invested. The two add up to less than 25 million. The 10.42 million on the first day has almost recovered most of the production costs, and the potential for profit is undoubtedly revealed. Therefore, the amount of box office is something that needs to be compared with one's own conditions. Superman Returns' first week box office beat that of Batman Begins, but it didn't meet Warner's expectations and flopped. It only took in 10 million on the first day, which is definitely a little brother in this era of rising box office, but in the low-budget movies, it is the big brother among big brothers, and it deserves the title of Dark Horse. After all, the first in the North American single-day box office list at that time was Little Miss Sunshine. Of course, it is not qualified to be the champion in the weekly box office list, but it is almost there. Because it was released on Wednesday, Talladega Nights, which was screened for 2 days before, still had more cumulative box office, but in fact it was only 6 or 7 million more, so the chance of overtaking is still very large. Therefore, the ranking of the weekly cumulative rankings and the ML is as follows. First place, Talladega Nights. Second place, Little Miss Sunshine. It is worth mentioning that the third place is Step Up, released by Disney. This film has captured a large number of young female audiences and set off a trend of learning to dance in the young market. It is also a low-cost dark horse. As for the fourth place, it is a movie about the dark clouds of 9/11. World Trade Center Farm, which has been released for more than a week, was squeezed to the fifth place. Because it is self-produced and self-sold, Blue Butterfly Pictures still puts a lot of effort in publicity. If it is an agent to distribute other people's works, it must be carefully calculated. After all, sometimes the box office is high, but the producer may not get the most. In Hollywood, there are a lot of bad things about distribution, and farces are repeatedly staged. But if the pie is bigger, the portion will be larger, as long as it does not exceed the market limit. This principle is also easy to understand. Therefore, Blue Butterfly Pictures quickly launched the second wave of publicity offensive. This time, in addition to continuing to brag about quality, more attention was paid to creating family warmth element, attracting the main audience, that is, audiences around 30 years old with jobs and families, to the theater, preferably with their wives. In the face of the continuous investment of real money, the film market also gave a good response. After the box office harvest of 10.42 million on the first day, it even got an upward data of 11.34 million on the second day, and the trend curve was very amazing. Then, it sat on the weekly box office champion as expected. Of course, this is also because there is nothing to beat in the August schedule, except for Pirates of the Caribbean 2, Dead Man's Chest, which is still harvesting box office, but is obviously declining. The total North American cumulative revenue has exceeded 300 million. None of the new movies released in August have the potential to touch the 100 million yuan mark. This naturally includes Little Miss Sunshine. The movie is very popular, but the audience is still limited. Moreover, the box office performance of 43.22 million in the first week declined in the second week. It is estimated that it is impossible to get 100 million yuan in ticket sales from North America alone. The worst side is that it seems that movies with a strong geopolitical culture like Little Miss Sunshine are not popular themes favored by the international market. The overseas performance is definitely far less than that of North America, which is naturally more difficult. However, based on the performance of the first week, relying on the positioning of the family market, the profit margin is still good. Such a movie is unlikely to explode in the market, but it will not fall off a cliff either. It will slowly decline and fluctuate from time to time. After more than a month of screening, it should be 60 or 70 million. Comparing it with the 1.5 times payback rule in North America, Little Miss Sunshine is conservatively estimated to bring Firefly $22.5 million in revenue just from the box office, which is already twice the production cost. The commission in North America is lower, and the channel dealers get less, so there is a very rough rule to estimate profitability called North America 1.5, and the global nearly 3. That is, if the North American box office exceeds 1.5 times the expenditure, the investment can be recovered, but in overseas regions, the box office must exceed 3 times, and a double box office profit margin is already higher than most movies. Of course, this is only in terms of the ratio of investment to return. Among them, in addition to Firefly's profits, with the increase in box office, the popularity of the entire crew is also rising. Now that you have fame, will there be fewer opportunities? Therefore, almost overnight, the leading actors of the crew also benefited from this. Chapter 682, Night at the Museum. After entering its second week, Little Miss Sunshine started to decline, and the attendance rate also began to drop. Of course, the decline was more than 30%, and the average daily revenue was 3 to 4 million. In the Firefly office, Ryan held up the report and couldn't help but sighed. Making movies is really profitable. After hearing this, Lemon couldn't help but joked, "You only see those who make money, but don't look at how many people have lost everything. At the beginning, didn't we also suffer a heartbreaking loss?" Moreover, working in theaters is really stable. No matter what movie is released, you can always get a share of the money, and you don't have to take such a big risk. Unfortunately, after the Paramount decree, film and television production companies are not allowed to intervene in theaters. Moreover, even if they can, the investment is huge, and the speed of capital recovery may not catch up with filming a movie. Forget it. I called you here today to discuss something. Lyman turned to the point and said, the company's production projects this year are still low. At the end of the year from December to January, I was thinking about arranging a movie with a larger investment to compete in the market. Why? Do you have any ideas? Yes, there are some, but they still need to be polished and improved. These few days, after careful consideration, Lyman decided to invest in another film. Sparta and The Prestige are all planned to be released this year. Several award-winning films are not screened in regular theaters and are not included. The Intouchables is too French in culture and its main battlefield is in Europe. From this point of view, the schedule arrangement seems too loose. For Blue Butterfly, it means that many schedules must be given up, and some films are randomly taken to make up the number. This is obviously not in line with the optimal coordination of resources and interests. Of course, Ryan was not surprised to hear this. He felt that Lyman's endless shooting ideas were quite natural and numb. In the afternoon, in a conference room, after Lyman and Ryan set the tone for the new work proposal, Joseph, Jonathan Nolan, Blake Cole, Garsha, Runia Gies and others all sat in their seats. When the company was about to start a new film, after some surprise, Joseph took the lead and said, the time is a bit rushed. If we want to release it at the end of the year, the arrangement of the script and production plan. Lyman smiled. It is a bit rushed, but as long as there are no accidents and delays, it can still be completed. But what about the script? Isn't it said that there is only a general idea? It may also take a lot of time to write the idea accurately into a script. Jonathan reminded. I understand what you mean. Don't worry, this project is not an award-winning movie, but a comedy, or a collection of brain-opening jokes. Ryan listened for a while, and stood up to explain. The story framework is not big, the scope is also small, and there is no need to change scenes everywhere. The shooting location is single. What really takes time is the post-production special effects. The progress of shooting will definitely be very fast. Comedy? This is very likely. But boss, don't you have a post-production work for The Intouchables on your hands? You still have energy. Seeing that Runia misunderstood, Lyman said with a smile, it's not me who will shoot it. Find another director to take charge. After this, everyone became more worried. Lyman's achievements and strength are there, which is quite reassuring. If he doesn't shoot, it will be difficult to prepare. However, let's hear about the project. Everyone cheered up. Seeing this, Lyman signaled Ryan to talk about the direction of the new work. Ryan understood and stood up and said, since it is a comedy project, it is natural to make the jokes clear, or the settings of this series. The background of the new work is in a museum. A night shift staff suddenly discovered that all the specimens and wax figures in the History Museum came alive one day. What will happen? Jonathan Nolan frowned and thought, and suddenly felt that this project was very good, because this setting naturally has selling points and funny points. There is a lot of room for development in what the wax figures do after they are resurrected, the response of the night shift staff, and the museum as a carrier. Ryan gave an example. The skeleton fossil of Tyrannosaurus Rex roared and rushed towards you, but it liked to lie on the ground and wag its tail to please you. Those people seemed to speak, mock, and even fought each other. At this time, Blake also said thoughtfully, using the contrast of identity and a bit of fantasy to tell history. This is really great, a bit like the shadow of Toy Story. Yes, it's a similar idea, but there are toys telling their voices, and here is the museum at night, resurrected by the unfolded exhibits, adding some spit and anthropomorphic styles. I believe that the audience will find it interesting after watching it. The premise is that the jokes we prepared are enough to impress the audience. Ryan approved. This is simple. The setting is so brilliant that some of the dialogues and interactions around it can become the development of jokes. Runia said confidently. Of course, as a qualified screenwriter, even if you are not good at comedy writing, it is still easy to play around and make some funny jokes. The museum series has too many things to summarize, and the space is large enough to accommodate a lot of brain holes. In fact, the original work is also a collection of jokes put together by a group of screenwriters. Now that the story framework has been given, the task of filling it in is not difficult. After all, a person may have limited ideas, but a group of people can freely play and then determine the context. There is no context. Night at the Museum is a fantasy comedy with lightness and joy as the main theme. Even similar resurrection settings have long been played out by Hollywood, but no one has thought of filming plots such as museums. Well, in this time and space, Fox has lost their trump card project, but they don't know it at this time. Because this script is a product of multiple creations, it was the inspiration that came first, and then the version was finalized. The original screenwriter Robert Ben Galland was originally from Fox. After the direction of the script writing had a specific idea, Joseph asked, "What about the director of the movie? Send a project invitation and see if there is a suitable candidate." Lyman replied, "Well, that's the only way. If you don't choose well, I'm afraid there will be trouble." Jonathan has been with his brother Nolan for so many years, and he can understand the importance of a good director to filming. After all, it is quite difficult to express the script accurately and to express the meaning in place. Otherwise, there would not be so few directors who have achieved results. Not everyone can put their ideas on the screen. After the new project Night at the Museum was successfully established, the screenwriter department determined the first version of the script and began to contact directors who had filmed comedy works. But those who have achieved results either have no schedule or have their own shooting plans and are still slowly looking for and coordinating. On this day, Lyman was dealing with some trivial matters in the office. The screening of Little Miss Sunshine in North America has exceeded 45 million, but the daily output continues to decline due to a large part of market consumption and the lack of comprehensive audience groups. Since the preparation of the new project began, due to the rush to meet the deadline, the director has not yet been determined, and the actors have also begun to be selected. This matter is simpler than the director, because the base of actors is wide enough and there are many suitable people. Instead, it has become a problem of choice, rather than having no goals. Later, Lyman looked at the progress of the company's various projects, and Mays came in to report that the leading actor had received a response. Because when discussing Night at the Museum, everyone knew that the investment was not small, and they all felt that they had to find an actor with a strong comedy status and appeal to play the role. Otherwise, it would be difficult to promote and attract fans. In this regard, everyone wanted Jim Carrey to play the role at the beginning. First, he is famous enough among comedians, and second, the two sides have worked together once, so there is a foundation. However, Jim Carrey is still preparing to transform and has taken on a horror movie. He is not available for the time being, unless he waits until the end of October. But for Firefly, this is obviously too long, so they have to contact several other people. Coincidentally, another male lead candidate that Lyman liked had a schedule and was very interested in the project. After receiving the invitation, he quickly rushed over with his agent. Chapter 683 Ben Stiller, subscribe, vote. Ben Stiller sat upright in his seat, still not understanding how he had any connection with Lyman Last, the head of Firefly. Although it was his agent who informed him of the invitation, the agent also mentioned that the other party's intention was very certain, and he had a feeling of being optimistic about him in advance, asking him to work hard and get the role. However, it can be said that this was the first time that Ben Stiller had dealt with such a well-known non-local director, and he was still a little unsure. Just as his agent was waiting outside, and he was alone inside, he suddenly heard a sound. He looked up and saw a person coming in from the door with a smile. It was Lyman, who rarely appeared in the media. So Ben Stiller quickly stood up and walked over to say hello. While shaking hands, he quickly raised his eyes and scanned a few times and found that the real person was more imposing than the photo. Lyman didn't notice Stiller's little move. He said a few words of greeting and then motioned to sit down and talk. Lyman still knew him. Born in New York in 1965, he entered the entertainment industry in 1987. In 1989, He became a screenwriter for Saturday Night Live and accumulated many connections in that well-rated show. There shouldn't be too many actors and behind-the-scenes workers who can go in and out of TV stations. It was also this accumulation that allowed him to make his first screen debut in 1994, a light comedy about love, the pain of reality at the age of 29. Unfortunately, the box office was not good after the movie was released, and he soon returned to the path of a comedian and screenwriter. But this actor who graduated from a professional school has never given up on taking up the director's baton. Lyman looked at the facial contours of Ben Stiller and vaguely matched the character who had played brilliantly in the Meet the Folks series and the Night at the Museum series. However, this person is far less funny and talkative than on the screen. In fact, he is quite quiet. Of course, acting, people are like roles. There is a more appropriate word to describe it, called too narrow acting range. Ben Stiller is a versatile actor. In terms of acting, if we only talk about comedy, his simple, honest, and a little shrewd style is quite distinctive. After all, this guy can direct and write, so it is easy for him to find the right position. Knowing that he has been free recently and has not taken other roles, Lyman nodded and asked, "Well, now my company has a new play vacant for the male lead. Are you willing to take it?" Ben Stiller was very surprised after hearing this. Although his fame soared after starring in Meet the Folks, he did not think he could be valued so much. So, what the agent mentioned about being very interested was not just a rhetoric, but true, and it might even exceed his understanding. Ben Stiller certainly did not refuse such a good thing, or it could be said that Lyman's market is now rising, and more people are optimistic about the development of Firefly. But the doubts in his heart still made Ben Stiller ask carefully, "Why, Mr. Last? Why did you choose to act?" Lyman smiled and said, "I have seen several movies you have acted in, and they overlap a lot with this role. Your performance is enough for it." After hearing this, Ben Stiller's heart finally fell. It is hard for him to believe that pie in the sky falls for no reason, especially in this place, where people like to make connections. He admitted that he rarely came into contact with Lyman, and he did not think that he was given a chance because he looked familiar to him, although this was the reason why Lyman chose him. In addition to the fact that he was the male lead in the original work and acted very well. In fact, the first person Fox favored was Jim Carrey, but they did not reach an agreement on the issue of film remuneration, and now it is difficult to coordinate the schedule. But in fact, Lyman valued The Daydreamer more. This small fresh fantasy light comedy directed by Lyman and starred by Jim Carrey has a good reputation. It was originally written, directed and acted by Ben Stiller. In the following days, he hosted a test audition, and the effect was also very satisfactory. Then, it was time to discuss the salary. Ben Stiller, as an actor who often strives to be a behind-the-scenes director, has rich acting experience, but not deep qualifications. In other words, if it weren't for the performance of Meet the Folks that exceeded expectations, he would not have had a movie with a box office of over 200 million. But with this market performance, the salary has increased rapidly. In the past, maybe 2 or 3 million would be enough, but now it has to increase to more than 10 million. If Museum is successful again, with the tradition of starring in series films daring to bid, it is not impossible to try 20 million in revenue. Of course, Lyman has plans to make Museum into a series of movies, so he must ask for a long-term contract, at least 3 films. At the conference table, Ben Stiller's agent has a different view. Agreement negotiation is the agent's home field, and the first principle is to serve and consider the client. As soon as he saw that he was going to sign a long-term contract, he keenly discovered that Firefly attached great importance to the project and might have formulated a relatively complete project plan. In this way, if the project is valued by the studio, it means that resources will be focused on. It is definitely a good thing for Ben Stiller to be able to participate in the film, but the bad thing is the long-term contract. All agents are very reluctant to sign long-term contracts for their clients. First, no matter how outstanding the performance is, the confidence to bid high is not high. Second, the salary range is too limited and almost tied to the studio. To sum up, it is too harsh, and it is made from the perspective of the studio, which is also disadvantageous to the actors. Many details must be based on the interests of the project and will not consider the career development of a certain actor. Therefore, although this role looks wonderful and has a bright future, there is one thing, that is that there is too little room for maneuver. So, what if I refuse this contract? Let's not talk about whether Ben Stiller is willing or not. The agent is good for the actor, but first of all, he must ensure that the other person's ideas are met. If he goes against it, he will definitely not be an agent for a long time. Even if the client is wrong, he should be persuaded by emotion and reason. He cannot decide the matter alone. Of course, this premises that the actors are in a relatively equal or strong position. A young actor who has just entered the industry naturally has no power to choose. Thinking of this, the agent first tried to probe, although the role of this project is good, signing a long-term contract. Is it necessary to discuss it? As far as I know. Sorry, Lyman interrupted. This is a basis of cooperation. If the basic conditions cannot be negotiated, there is no need to discuss it further. I can clearly guarantee that museum will be a series of works, and the adaptation plan has a follow-up idea. Therefore, Firefly is looking for an actor who can play the role well, and will not cause any trouble, and the latter is more important than the former. I don't want to have such a bad thing happen suddenly while filming. You should understand. The agent quickly denied. We don't want to cause trouble, Mr. Last. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Therefore, Firefly needs such a contract as a guarantee. As long as you agree on this, we can continue to talk. The atmosphere in the conference room suddenly became quiet. After a long time, the agent said, I need to discuss it with my client. Please. Lyman raised his hand to indicate. About 10 minutes later, Ben Stiller, who was sitting outside drinking coffee, said something to his agent. He sat down at the conference table again, obviously more relaxed. What does he mean? Lyman asked. Well, Mr. Last, we can agree to a long-term contract, but, he emphasized the last sentence. Lyman said with interest, tell me, your conditions? Box office share. I require that the box office revenue be used as a salary for the role. Anything else? After the movie is released, if the North American box office exceeds the production cost, which is $150 million, which is twice the production cost of $75 million US, the sequel must increase by 30% on the original basis. The basic salary will be based on Mr. Ben Stiller's salary of $7 million in Meet the Folks 2. In that film, his role was smaller than in the museum, so it should be increased. I will give a basic salary of $10 million for the first film. For the second film, as long as we can still cooperate, I will give $13 million plus 5% of the net profit of the North American box office. For the third film, I will give $15 million and the box office share remains unchanged. If you agree, then I can formulate it according to these conditions now. The agent hesitated for a moment. Compared with the bottom line given by the client, it was definitely higher, but never mind. It would be difficult for me if it failed. I might as well quit while I'm ahead. Chapter 684 J. Roach. Subscribe. Vote. Ben Stiller didn't think there was anything wrong with signing a long-term contract. Of course, the premise was that the remuneration for the performance was generous enough, and the first $10 million US was definitely satisfactory to him. 2 copies of the contract were signed under the witness of the lawyers of both parties. Ben Stiller asked easily, Mr. Last, can I know when the filming will start? Not sure yet. We naturally hope to move forward quickly, but we haven't found a suitable director yet. If you have any recommendations, you can mention them. You should know more comedy directors than I do. Ben Stiller took this to heart. 2 days later, Ben Stiller really brought in a comedy director and recommended J. Roach. Speaking of this person, he is also a great man who has achieved success late in the comedy circle. He can write, direct, and produce, and has also written scripts. As for his works, the most familiar ones to everyone may be Austin Powers and Meet the Focus series. It was 1997. J. Roach, who was already 40 years old, had made several films that had not yet found their style and had accumulated experience in script writing. With the investment of New Line Cinema, he tinkered with the work with an anti-agent image. No one expected that this very contrasting and spoof film would be very popular with the audience. It was released on the eve of the summer season and won more than 53.8 million box office in one fell swoop. Of course, it was precisely because of the unexpected and wrong estimation of the market potential of the film that New Line Cinema was one step slower in arranging the film. Otherwise, more than 50 million would not be the end of this film. Because it entered the offline market later, the videotapes and DVDs of this film were sold out directly. The second part was released in 1999, and the cumulative box office in the first weekend was much higher than the total box office of the first part, and the momentum was close to the first part of Star Wars. Then the peripheral copyrights also rose with the tide, and the children's clothing with related images became a hit during that period, which shows the audience's acceptance. However, Lyman was more interested in his directing style. Jay Roach was very good at spoof and contrast humor. Meet the Focus was actually a similar routine, except that the Time-Space Spy 007 became an alternative interpretation of the relationship between the father-in-law and the son-in-law. So when Ben Stiller invited him, Lyman was quite satisfied. To be precise, after the decline of New Line, Jay Roach's most common studio was Universal, and he also opened his own studio. Generally speaking, he would not easily cooperate with other companies, and there was no way to get him to do anything. As for the original director Shawn Levy, he was inseparable from Fox, which was even more difficult. Jay Roach sat on the sofa, not knowing how to deal with it. He is old, and his desire to make movies is not as strong as when he was young. In addition, his reputation is getting bigger, so he is very cautious about projects, fearing that he will fall into a trap if he is not careful. That is why he does not like to cooperate with studios that he has never dealt with before and has always been dealing with Universal. Then there is Meet the Folks 2. The production budget has been raised, but the box office performance is not as amazing as the first one. Universal is not willing to continue to start this project, which makes him a little upset, but he also notes that things like sequels can easily consume audience expectations. Then, Ben Stiller invited him to direct a new project. Because of the filming of the two Meet the Folks, the relationship between the two is very good, or in other words, Jay Roger has a lot of topics to talk about with such an actor with a lot of ideas and people with directing experience. It is common for them to visit each other. When he came over yesterday, of course, he said it casually that he just wanted us to work together again, and explained a little bit how much Firefly valued the museum project. As for the script and the general content, he didn't say it out of professionalism, but he mentioned that it was a comedy and said that he had decided to participate, but the director position was still vacant, and it was up to director Roger to decide whether to take the role. What made Jay's mind fluctuate the most was the sentence "let's work together again." On the contrary, he didn't care so much about whether to value it or not. If the project was not good, he would definitely not take it. He had passed the rookie period, where he needed to desperately seize every opportunity. So, in the end, he decided to come and meet. Jay looked at Lyman, who was close to him, after he came in, and he felt a little touched. Regardless of whether they would cooperate or not, he still had a good impression of this famous director, and he had come here, so how could he not feel the bottom of it? It's better to ask first. After a few greetings and courtesies, Jay got straight to the point. "Can I see the script first?" Comedy projects also have different directions, and whether they are suitable is very important. Of course, Lyman took out the first version of the official script written by the screenwriter department and handed it to Jay. Then, he understood what Ben Stiller meant when he told him to cooperate. "This script, why does it feel like my style?" Jay Roger was very surprised. Because Night at the Museum directly overturned the serious historical record and relatively high-end image of the museum in the past and replaced it with a spit show. Well, this is the same comedy technique as him turning the mainstream and positive image of the agent at that time into a lucky fool, that is, breaking the audience's habitual thinking. Well, the script is considered to be passed. Jay put down the script and was satisfied. Apart from anything else, this subject matter is very much to his taste. After Jay was interested in the project, he asked again, "How much is the investment, and what do you think about shooting fireflies?" This is to test his voice in the execution of the project. However, these are exactly what Lyman had considered a long time ago. For a director of Jay's level, fame and profit are no longer so important. On the contrary, the higher a director stands, the more he cares about his control over the entire project. Lyman himself was like this, so of course he could understand other directors. He said with certainty, the budget is 75 million. Except for Ben Stiller taking 10 million, the special effects business is contracted by Digital Domain. As long as you join, you can direct the rest. We only look at the results. After Lyman finished speaking, he looked at Jay quietly. This condition can already satisfy a director's desire for control. The rest of the actors can be directly filled with his direct team. As long as they are suitable, Lyman will not object. Anyway, the budget is there, and if the filming can be completed within this range, everyone will be happy. But if you want to ask for more money halfway through the filming like Cameron, it proves that you have half the money making ability of that paranoid director. Of course, most normal directors will not experiment with new technologies during the filming process, or deviate significantly from the filming plan. Lyman actually wanted to sign a few more film contracts with Jay Rogers, but directors are different from actors. Few people who work behind the scenes would threaten to raise their prices by using the projects they lead. Judging from the union's performance, the salary for each step is very well stipulated, and there is no such thing as a one-step rise. Even when Cameron made Titanic, he did not get too much salary that he should not get. In other words, you can ask for more freedom in filming, but the salary will not change as quickly as that of actors. Of course, this is also because most directors who have achieved results get a share of the box office. The better the film's performance, the more they get, and there is no need to discuss the basic salary. Jay got the filming commitment, carefully weighed it for a while, hesitated again and again, but still couldn't resist the surprise brought to him by night at the museum, and finally affirmed, "I like this script very much. I will start filming after signing the filming contract tomorrow." As for how much salary he can get, there is no need to mention it at all, because his agent in Firefly will definitely negotiate a reasonable clause. In fact, directors are much easier to deal with than actors. Lyman will not refuse to give a share of the box office profit for the benefit of the company. He has always believed that the director's salary should be determined by the box office. Who should be rewarded more, a brain that manages the overall situation or a tool that is controlled? Of course, perhaps for big name actors, their appeal and the fan market they have worked hard to build are also a bargaining chip that can be brought to the negotiation table. There is no question of whether it is a scam or not. Negotiations. If you can reach an agreement, you can cooperate. If you can't reach an agreement, there is no loss. Everyone is fighting for their own benefits. Besides, the butt determines the head. There is not much difference between the superior and the inferior. Chapter 685 Jay's direct team, subscriptions, votes. The next day, Firefly officially signed a director contract with Jay Roger. In addition to confirming the editing rights and shooting matters, the salary range marked the basic director fee of $8 million plus 5% of the North American net box office revenue are also the unanimous conditions recognized by both parties. The agreement was reached, and Jay Roger began to prepare the crew. Lyman left the meeting room, feeling relieved. This project is considered the company's big drama at the end of the year. It is definitely a guarantee to find a thick-thigh director who has a lot of experience in comedy shooting. Although it is a bit expensive, it is worth it. He has been a big director with a revenue of over $300 million in the 1990s. He has 2 best-selling series. Except for the non-comedy themes that are always unpopular, plus the production is a bit low, there is nothing to be picky about in other aspects. When Lyman returned to the office, he picked up the project that the company was promoting and watched it, and he couldn't help but feel a little complacent. With the accumulation of the company's strength and the recruitment of talents, it is no problem to shoot a few more movies now. Think about it, the combination of Zack Snyder, Nolan, James Wan and the 3 Mexican heroes all have very personal styles and can achieve results in their respective familiar fields. Oh, all the talents in the world are in the hub. Okay. Jay Roger is very good at comedy, but from another perspective, his thinking is limited. In the field of directing, those who are famous for making comedies feel that something is missing when they go to make more serious ones. Perhaps this is also because people have limited focus and energy. If one part is used more, other parts may be insufficient. After taking over the museum project, J. Roger took the script and repeatedly pondered more suitable and more humorous scene designs, and occasionally pulled Ben Stiller to ponder together. Although his output is low, once he decides to shoot, he still works hard, even when he is old. During the days of writing and painting, he did not forget to find actors. This morning, several familiar actors invited him to come over by phone. Among them are Owen Wilson and Ben Kingsley, who have worked together many times. Owen Wilson has rarely appeared in the spotlight in recent years. The reason is that he fell in love with the heroine Kate Hudson during the filming of Threesomes 2 years ago. Of course, after The Passion, the two soon had quarrels and conflicts, and were on the verge of falling out. J. Roger is not interested in non-direct actors at all, just like he has never worked with Jim Carrey. He only likes to promote those he knows or direct descendants. And Owen Wilson is Ben Stiller's good friend. The two have known each other since they were unknown. Later, they each got their own opportunities and never lost contact in the middle. These two are also the combination with the most cooperation. Basically, Owen Wilson is indispensable in any project that Ben Stiller can speak for. Even if it is just a cameo, he will go to show his support. Naturally, J. Roger became familiar with Owen. For this new project, he did not need to audition everywhere, and he could find the right one from his past connections. As for Ben Kingsley, this somewhat thin, bald British actor is very malleable. He has experience in playing comedy roles, not to mention that he has also played the honest and upright US Vice President Nance, which naturally fits the museum project. After the two came, they sat around to discuss the script. In the meantime, Owen Wilson's mood has been wrong. Or rather, he was too silent. Ben Stiller, who is most familiar with him, took the initiative to lead the topic, but Owen was still like this. After repeated inquiries, Owen also expressed his troubles, but there was a problem with his relationship with Hart. Ben Stiller advised him that at worst, they would break up, and he didn't take it to heart. Breakups and separations are not too common in Hollywood. Unfortunately, Owen Wilson took it a little seriously this time. In addition, he has played too many comedies, and the whole person is under great psychological pressure. Forcing a smile is a necessary skill for being a public figure, but comedy actors really devote themselves to please others. Think about it. Comedy characters are either silly, or have a single-minded way of thinking. They always deliberately, or follow the plot, to achieve a certain comedy effect, by using the character's bad luck and misfortune. If you play this kind of role too much, you will be chased by film critics, and accused of having no acting skills. What can you gain from being rated a Golden Raspberry Award, except for earning more money, and increasing your fame? Now that you are famous, and not short of money, it is easier to get stuck in a dead end. This is why comedians who become famous will have more or less psychological problems, and the most common thing is inexplicable depression. Depression comes in a flash. In the original Time and Space, Owen Wilson, who began to fade out of the public eye after 2004, was on the news for cutting his wrists and taking an overdose of drugs shortly after breaking up with his girlfriend. If his family and friends had not discovered it in time, the consequences would have been. The new film project of Firefly Pictures soon entered the shooting stage. The estimated cost of $70 to $75 million is also destined to be a high investment project. Because of the change of producers and directors, the main creative team has naturally changed. If the original version is a product with the mark of Fox, then it is also appropriate to say that this version is marked with the mark of Meet the Folks. In addition to providing funds and script ideas, Firefly is coordinated by J. Roger and Ben Stiller. Look at the list of actors: Owen Wilson, Ben Kingsley, Terry Polo, Thomas McCarthy. More than 70% are actors who have worked with J. Roger, and the remaining minor supporting roles are directly selected by the agency. This team is not short of fame and appeal, so it is naturally not cheap. In addition to Ben Stiller, who received $10 million, Owen's role is much less, only $3.2 million, and the others add up. The actor alone spent $22 million, accounting for about 3/10 of the total project. Of course, this play is not complicated to shoot, and the location has long been selected in a museum in the UK. The reason why the crew went to the UK to shoot was because of the British government's tax refund policy for the film and television industry. The mystery of the shadow is also a product of this approach, because the British government stipulates that, as long as more than 30% of British industry personnel join a film and television project, and more than half of the filming is in the UK, the project valuation will be refunded with 20% to 30% tax, based on the union's judgment. Of course, film and television shooting can drive the service industry and tourism industry, so it is hard to say who is more advantageous. Hollywood has always studied this thoroughly. This is why film and television shooting always likes to choose the UK, Australia, New Zealand and other places, because these countries have similar policies that can reduce project investment. For studios, why not save some money? What needs to be compared is just which one is more convenient and more conducive to project production. Of course, if it is a low-cost subject, there is no need to travel all over the country. If you can't save, the air ticket money may not be enough. In addition, there is the special effects work in the digital field. After these days, with the financial and business support from Firefly, Digital Domain is much better than the miserable situation after Cameron withdrew from the company. At present, this special effects company has 5 project teams responsible for promoting the in-depth research and development of new technologies, focusing on motion capture and background rendering. Some time ago, Lyman went to see it. Although it is definitely not as good as the shooting system developed by Weta Digital, it can still be compared with Industrial Light and Magic. In other words, Industrial Light and Magic's technology is strong in its adaptability to the environment. Even if a professional studio is not built, it can be operated outdoors without being affected by environmental factors such as strong light and noise. Digital Domain has a lot of experience in large scenes and rendering. Take the war scenes in Sparta as an example. If you want to achieve the rich color effects of oil paintings and realistic action scenes in slow motion that Zack Snyder wants, Digital Domain can save at least 20% of the cost of Industrial Light and Magic, and even less manpower investment. For example, at this moment, they were in charge of the special effects of Sparta, while taking overnight at the museum. There was no shortage of manpower at all. Chapter 686, Anger Attack. Please subscribe and vote. The office building of Lionsgate headquarters was brightly lit, and the employees worked diligently. When it was almost time to get off work, no one left early. Since the acquisition, the management has changed every few days, not to mention the employees below. Everyone is trying to avoid becoming the next person to leave. In the office, John Felmer sat in the boss chair, not pretending to be an executive at all. He held a market document, asked questions to several subordinates while reading it, and occasionally praised them a few words, releasing intimacy, which made the conversation atmosphere quite harmonious. The attitude of the top leader rather than the major shareholder of the board of directors made the people sitting on the sofa on the right relax a lot. These people were all managers who entered the Lionsgate system from the original company in the recent acquisition, to expand the company's territory. They were still unfamiliar with the new environment, new colleagues, and new bosses, and inevitably had many concerns. Originally, I was still thinking about how to get along with John Felmer, but I didn't expect that the boss would express his attitude first, and I felt a little cordial without realizing it. Of course, for John Felmer, what to talk about in this conversation was not important, but the person was more important. After all, every time there is an acquisition, some are dissolved, and some are absorbed. It still takes some thought to reassure these new members. It is normal for people to feel overwhelmed and unsure after changing to a new company. What he wants to do is to make these people confident in the future of the company and work hard. Lionsgate still has a solid foundation, although it is also constrained by the market because of the limited resources of theaters. It dares not rashly launch high-risk, high-investment projects, but it has produced small-cost projects of about 10 or 20 million. In fact, they are also in the pain period now, and they are still hiding their ambitions in order to open up overseas channels. Moreover, Lionsgate now looks very powerful, but it is not a threat to the Big Six, and they don't take it seriously at all. Just like on September 1st, Lionsgate's new film Raging Fire was released. with an investment of $12 million and less than 1,300 screens. It is a typical B-level production. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor are also screenwriters with little experience and no fame. The only one who can show off among the entire crew seems to be the male lead Jason Statham. In today's era, when action movies are no longer mainstream, it is clear that they just want to make a quick buck by producing an action movie with no big scenes. For the big six, B-level productions are the most marginalized projects with few resources within them, but they are the mainstream production in Lionsgate, who would pay special attention to them. Of course, this project is a cost-effective work. It is a film that reduces risks and grabs a specific audience. If you have to summarize the plot, Crazy Angry has a bit of the shadow of Speed. The only difference is that the car in Speed was equipped with a bomb, while in Crazy Angry, the killer played by Jason Statham was poisoned. As long as the heart beats slower than expected, he will die. What a stupid setting. That's right, the mobile gunpowder magazine that automatically explodes into pieces once it falls below a predetermined speed. Now, 10 years have passed, and a madman whose structure has been changed by a deadly poison has taken over the baton of Speed. However, this time, compared with the endurance of mechanical gasoline, the one who is poisoned and exhausted at any time is a human. Therefore, Jason Statham can often be seen jumping up and down inexplicably in the film. Therefore, such a convenient and low-cost movie. As soon as it was released, the freshness of Rotten Tomatoes dropped to 61%. Of course, if the unreasonable poison setting for the rationality of the plot is discarded, Jason Statham's dry humor is a plus. The crew still chose a good actor. After the older generation of action movie stars either transformed or fell silent, Jason Statham has become a screen tough guy with good audience appeal. And in the first weekend, Crazy Fury actually won $10.46 million, which is also a small surprise for Lionsgate. You know, they invested less than $2 million in the promotion of this film. It can be said that they let it fend for itself. They only posted posters in the theaters, where it was shown and nearby. They were too lazy to even cut the trailer, and there was only one version. Of course, John Feller, who was holding the report, was very satisfied with the performance of Crazy, but he was envious of Little Miss Sunshine, which ranked third in the fourth week with 8.23 million in the weekly rankings after 3 weeks of screening. We are both low-cost films. My work is a hit, and at most it has the potential of 30 or 40 million, but yours has 60 or 70 million. Think about it, it seems not so happy. In fact, this is also the general view of industry insiders on the work Little Miss Sunshine. If Disney's Step Up seized the opportunity of the resurgence of musicals, and the plot was particularly suitable for young audiences, and achieved a dark horse market performance, then Little Miss Sunshine is a bit unpredictable. Is it well shot? The quality has indeed withstood the test of the market, but the subject matter is not the mainstream of the box office. It is more literary and artistic, and it is rare to be able to sell at the box office without losing money. This is why Focus Features gave up the proposal to shoot Little Miss Sunshine after much consideration, and finally Firefly picked it up. When the first week results of Little Miss Sunshine came out, the executives of Focus Features were so complicated. This is just like Breaking Bad relying on word-of-mouth ratings to grow against the trend. HBO, CBS and other TV stations that rejected the series also have a different experience. After the purpose of the conversation and communication felt similar, John Felmer slightly indicated that there was still work to do, and the other few people got up and left on their own initiative. Alas, looking at the series of numbers on the report, John Felmer pinched his eyebrows with some reluctance. He is in charge of such a large mess, and the company's production is not very powerful, compared with Firefly. It is naturally not good, but it is actually very good. It has been profitable in recent years, and it is still spending money on overseas layout. At this moment, in the office of Blue Butterfly Pictures, Lyman and Lyman were also chatting. It was just not about personnel matters, but about schedule arrangements. Christopher Nolan's The Prestige was completed at the end of April this year, and the post-production was busy until mid-August, and the final film was completely completed. When Lyman went to watch it, he also praised Nolan. Of course, this film is not a mainstream theme, it is a test product, experimenting and exploring the shooting style. It can be said that many ways of the second Dark Knight can be found in The Prestige. From the time the film was confirmed, the schedule issue was quickly put on the agenda of Blue Butterfly Pictures. In the original time and space, Nolan joined the Warner camp, so this film was arranged by Warner in the later part of October, mainly to cooperate with the harvest market on Christmas Eve and fill the theater resources vacated during this period. But for Firefly, Christmas Eve is the end of October and the beginning of November. It is more appropriate to choose a movie that can be stable and squeeze into Christmas with the subsequent market trend. Sparta is more suitable than The Prestige. Because Sparta is more mainstream, The Prestige is suspenseful and has more Dark Knight imaging. The plot is filled with magic and requires patience to know all kinds of details. For the audience, it is a bit too brain-consuming and visually uncomfortable. Why do most movies like to use shots with richer colors, such as soft yellow, bright red, and light blue? It is because the human visual system is more receptive and can better stand the impression of these colors. On the contrary, when Batman Begins was made, some viewers were not happy with the large number of night scenes in the film. Then, The Prestige is Nolan's further exploration of this image style. After shooting Batman Begins, it is conceivable that without Batman as the biggest attraction of suspense, the audience's acceptance will definitely be lower. Of course, for movies, some people like them very much, while others cannot accept them at all. The more mainstream ones that can be recognized and given a passing score are the most stable commercial works. Obviously, The Prestige lost because it was not mainstream enough and not stable enough. So, Nolan was not so unacceptable that his work had to give way to Sparta. After all, movies can sometimes be very popular and sometimes very niche. Chapter 687 Two Rivals, Subscriptions, Votes. Lyman had thought about the release date of The Prestige, and the range given was September 15th, Friday, for the nationwide release. Because by that time, Blue Butterfly would not have other distribution work on hand, and Little Miss Sunshine would soon be released, so he could focus on promotion, and he could also communicate better with the theaters and discuss the number of canvases. Moreover, if it is released in mid-September, the market potential will be exhausted in mid-October, and then Sparta can be connected to continue to harvest the box office. This idea is a relatively appropriate arrangement. Therefore, Lyman also approved of Lyman's plan. After discussing the release date, the two chatted about the offline market. This aspect is more casual. After all, Firefly does not have any powerful copyright peripheral channels. It is just a more traditional distribution promotion, and it also relies on offline giants such as Blockbuster and Mattel. Their sales network is one of many offline partners. It can be said that in terms of copyright development, among the 6 major companies, except for Warner, which has done well, Disney is the only one in a class. From theme parks and resort hotels, to image peripherals and licensed development, each link has sufficient accumulation and marketability, unlike the extensive style of Firefly, which does not know which direction to expand. Lyman is also very troubled by this. In the company, he feels that the most advantageous ones are film directors like his boss who can produce high quality content. The reason why they can get resources and tilt resources to become big is that the quality of the content can bring good benefits to all aspects of power, such as theater operators and channel operators. Otherwise, who would look at Firefly more? However, the accumulation of such resources is limited, or it can be said to be an inherent disadvantage. Therefore, the current situation of being neither up nor down is really the result of such market restrictions, which makes Lyman very helpless. Moreover, in order to shut up opponents such as Warner and Paramount, they must be tough themselves. If they do not give them opportunities to take advantage of, the theater resources will be insufficient. For the project itself, there must be sacrifices. If it was 100% before, now the distribution is not only more stressful and risky, but also not worth any actual benefits. It is estimated that it is only 80% left. Of course, without a partner who shares the profits, the total revenue will not be much less, but it is not much better either. In other words, desperately trying to protect oneself is at best a mediocre result, which is really depressing. However, Compared to Lyman's pessimistic thoughts, Lyman is very confident about the future. When the great change comes, who would have thought that the film and television industry would also be fragile? Oh, no, it is the beacon country of America that is also weak. After a while, Lyman said again, the focus of publicity is to make a fuss about the two leading actors. Lyman understood immediately. Batman vs. Wolverine is a good topic. I just don't know if Fox is willing to cooperate in hyping this gimmick. And Warner Brothers. Lyman thought his boss's words were interesting and laughed. No, Warner will definitely agree. Maybe they are more afraid of damaging the newly established image of Batman than we are. Superman is blocked, and Batman cannot afford to fail. You see, they definitely want the prestige to be successful more than we do, or at least its reputation cannot be bad. As for Fox, it depends on their intention. After cooperating for a while, they should be willing to give a little help. Warner is dragging its feet now, and I don't know what they are thinking. Are we just going to wait like this? Lyman asked when talking about the Batman project. Lemon nodded. We can't give in anymore. If we give in one step, we will give in every step. It will be hard to wait for such a tough moment as today. I guess they are definitely willing to talk. It is said that the mess of Superman has caused two senior executives to resign. Well, 2 deputy managers should be brought in to share the pressure. However, the copyright is in their hands. We only have the filming rights, and we are also subject to the 3-film limit, so we don't have much confidence. Haha, I think this is our biggest confidence. Think about it, Superman has changed so many directors, and finally found Brian, but it still failed. Now, Nolan has proved that he has the ability to direct Batman, can grasp the market and audience fans, and drive the image appreciation. If you are a senior executive of Warner's distribution department, are you willing to give up the existing situation, take huge risks to reshuffle, and take another gamble? Would you? Okay. Whoever makes this decision can make it. I'll just be an executor. Whoever makes this decision will bear the responsibility. Are Warner's senior executives really willing to gamble? Status and wealth are put on the gambling table at once. For those who always look for the optimal solution in the market and want stability, it is probably unlikely. In fact, even if Lemon stood in Warner's perspective, he would not have made such a choice. Nolan is now like a surprise soldier. It is not easy to bring new vitality to the market for Batman and arouse the audience's interest and expectations. Is it going to be extinguished directly? Let's not talk about what the audience who watched Batman Begins thinks, and whether they will boycott it. Just take this risk. It is not cost effective, and not worth it. And Nolan is our man. Warner failed to poach him once, which made it even more passive. Of course, most of the time, for a studio like Warner, the director is just a tool, a small piece of the puzzle to improve the plan. But who is Warner willing to trust? A famous director who has been proven once, and a director who has not been verified by the market, but is also famous? This is a very simple multiple choice question. Choice A is Nolan, because he laid the foundation for Batman Begins. Choice B is also Nolan, because his very personal style of imaging techniques is not something that ordinary people can imitate. In this way, Warner seems to have only one way to go. The original team, the original creators, the original investment, the taste of restoration. But can Warner tell Firefly that they have tried so hard, but were discouraged by the harsh terms of participating in the North American distribution revenue? In the meantime, the shareholders on the board of directors are not quiet either. In short, they also have a lot of troubles. For the Batman project, the general answer from the meeting discussion is, handle it carefully, talk about it slowly, and don't be led by the nose. Warner is not a one-man show. It is impossible to give an answer to every decision instantly. What else can be done if it is not dragged? The middle and lower level employees cannot control it, and the top level is very cautious and difficult to control, so they can only end it hastily and wait for the opportunity. After chatting, Lemon left Blue Butterfly Pictures. When he returned home, it was late at night. Lemon stood on the balcony of the second floor bedroom. It was quiet all around, and the bright moon was hanging above his head. In the distance, there was an increasingly vast starry sky. Looking down, with the geographical location on the hillside, the city lights were still bright. feeling the comfort of the breeze, I feel inexplicably at peace. Warner, Disney, Reputation, channels. The first two are the targets that Firefly focuses on. As for Fox, Paramount and the like, they are either declining or heading in the wrong direction. Oh, and there is also the MGM, that has been ruined. The latter two need to continue to improve. Reputation means too much, I'm sure you will understand. And channels are the blood supply system of the studio, and they cannot be let go easily. The size of the blood vessels is related to how far the giant Firefly can go, and how much endurance it has. It can't look huge, but it will be shattered at a single blow. It is just a showpiece. Lemon has made up his mind that allies and partners are unreliable. When the interests are consistent, it doesn't matter how close they are. Once they block the way or pose a threat, it is clear how to treat them. What Firefly needs is to continue to accumulate reputation, strengthen company foundation, until one day, just like the Big Six now, with only a name, a label, and a complete network, countless studios will take the initiative to invest, forming a trend, and that is the future of Firefly. Some difficulties and some setbacks in development are just necessary trials on the road to the future. Tang Monk had to go through 49 tribulations and 81 difficulties to obtain the scriptures. What does it matter if the theater resources are not sufficient? How long have the Big Six been in business? How long has Firefly been in business? And how long has DreamWorks been in business? Countless examples are telling Lemon that the road to success is not easy, but it has to be walked. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 688, Clown. Subscribe, vote. Lemon didn't know that the director Nolan he was discussing had temporarily put the prestige behind him and approached his brother Jonathan to conceive the second Batman movie. Of course, he didn't care about the mess between Warner and Firefly. For him, being able to make a good movie, being able to make a movie in a relatively free environment, and improving his living standards at the same time, that was what he valued. Few directors spend extravagantly. Perhaps it was a process of watching movies all year round, enjoying and enriching his spiritual world, and enjoying his works being loved by the audience. Pursuing movies is far more interesting than any other unnecessary enjoyment. In a very tidy study, next to a small desk, Nolan and Jonathan sat side by side, flipping through various materials, including but not limited to Batman, The Killing Joke, The Dark Knight and other comics. For the sequel, Lemon had provided some ideas, such as adding a more chaotic villain. As early as the filming of the first movie, Nolan used part of his perspective to portray the virtual and sinking city of Gotham. Naturally, this part of the idea could not be wasted in the second movie. But how to show the high pressure when the order after anarchy is about to collapse is a difficult problem. After many assumptions, Nolan noticed the Joker. This character who acts and has a personality like the dark side of Batman undoubtedly has this kind of crazy potential. More importantly, it has always been popular among the villains in the Batman series of comics. To be honest, before taking over the Batman project, Nolan had not read much related comics. This type of reading is not his favorite, so in the creative process, he spent a lot of time to make up for the character settings and part of the worldview. According to the success of the first part and the design of the Prestige, the sequel continues the realistic and dark style, but the script writing still needs to be slowly improved and filled. All Lemon can help is to point out some key points, such as the description of the Joker's behavior, not to write it as a very ordinary criminal, but a person who is engraved with anarchism in his bones, and the motive for crime is also to attack the credibility of the government, overthrow the judicial order, and destroy the social justice that Batman has always maintained. If Batman is a very chivalrous character who will not indulge himself and use fear to maintain the stability of Gotham, then the Joker should be a master of manipulating people's hearts and trying to overturn everything. Nolan remembered what Lemon said, one person dies today, and one person dies tomorrow, and no one will be uneasy, because there are always all kinds of accidents in the world, and birth, aging, illness and death are inevitable, but if someone says that the flag of Gotham should die, then the people will feel uneasy, and will be like crazy. As for Nolan, he actually doesn't like Batman who transcends the law, even if he is just, so the tone of the second part is to remove the shiny hat of voluntary policeman and completely devote himself to the night. After going through the past that is unbearable to look back on, if you want to maintain justice, you have to pay a price. In short, Batman can't get rid of the night, and he can't let him get rid of it. Therefore, Nolan thinks that this second part will tell the story of the contest between two opponents who transcend the rules. Everything else serves this main line. With a general direction, how to implement it is still a lot of work. At this time, Nolan and Jonathan had basically stopped seeing Outsiders, and were obsessed with writing the sequel. This was his Batman, a story he understood, not just a copy of the comics. But it was unrealistic to be completely divorced from it, so they needed to make up for their knowledge. They read the comics and slowly derived the image of the Joker they needed. From top to bottom, from inside to outside, they pushed it again, and then based on the ideas and inspirations that kept appearing in the middle, they reached the entire theme of the Dark Knight. Because he had been influenced by the culture of the classical Victorian era since he was a child, Nolan did not intend to strengthen the strength of the characters in the second part, and Batman would still be injured, hesitate, and die. Others might get into the role when reading comics, but Nolan put aside those boring settings that were added for the sake of excitement, and directly looked at the inner essence of a character, and then figured out how to show similar characteristics in the new work. Therefore, the script of The Dark Knight was written very slowly, and it was often abandoned immediately after writing a paragraph. But because of Lemon's constant reminders, he didn't have no idea where to start. It was still dawn when Christian Bale got up from the bed, washed up briefly, and went into the exercise room. In order to maintain his figure, or to shape his body, it is necessary for him to sweat every day. But today's exercise always made him a little distracted. Yesterday, he had a conversation with Lemon, and Christian Bale didn't know what his mood was at the time. In short, it was very complicated. Lemon told him yesterday that the script for Batman's sequel The Dark Knight was being written. Of course, Nolan also told him similar news, which was not surprising. After all, he has a good relationship with Nolan, and there is no plan to replace the role of Batman Firefly. There is nothing to say, and it is also good to be informed and prepare for the role in advance. But because of the success of Batman Begins and the increase in popularity, Christian Bale's value is definitely not as good as before he did not participate. Not to mention how successful the character image is. Just talking about the project with a global box office of more than 374 million yuan can be turned into a bargaining chip on the negotiation table. Of course, he is not actually worried about the salary issue. Although his agent now regrets signing a long-term contract for the trilogy, Christian Bale doesn't think it's a big deal. Anyway, the money he earned from the first movie is enough for him to use for a long time. This guy's not an actor who spends money lavishly. On the contrary, he is a person who pursues his own acting career. Otherwise, after becoming famous, he would not take works like Vice President and The Fighter. Doesn't he know that losing weight and gaining weight quickly will affect his health? Even if he doesn't know, his agent team knows it, but he still does it. If you don't like it, who is willing to sacrifice for a role? The trilogy is limited to the role of Batman, which makes him afraid of being stereotyped by the audience like Hugh Jackman. Especially during the cooperation in The Prestige, Hugh Jackman said some things from his heart. You know, in order to cooperate with Fox's publicity, he had to always pay attention to the fact that he was Wolverine, a character, not his original appearance. Even if the movie was taken off the screen, he still couldn't get rid of the audience's existing impression. He has participated in so many movies, but fans only call him Uncle Wolf. To be honest, he doesn't like this title, which makes him feel that he is stuck. Christian Bale will also experience this kind of trouble. In fact, after the initial excitement, and joy, Bale seems to have discovered some shackles brought to him by the role of Batman. What's more depressing is that this shackle seems to be trapped. Bale can keenly feel that his acting career may face a huge challenge. In the past, he is still himself, Trig Bateman, American Psycho, Travo, The Mechanic, and many roles, not just Bruce Wayne. Such a balance is broken, and the unpredictability of the situation is the reason why Christian Bale feels complicated. More importantly, he can't refuse. Not only because he had signed a contract and had to fulfill it, but also because Nolan and Lyman were both directors he admired very much. The combination of the two made it difficult for him to say no. In other words, it was a headache. There was no way, just take it one step at a time. Thinking back to what Lyman had said to him yesterday, he felt that the second part would be more exciting and more outstanding, which was good news. Even if he was playing a recurring role, he still had to bring some novelty. Raising his hand to take the towel to wipe himself, he went to the bathroom to take a shower, and then drove back to the community where Nolan lived. Nolan did not buy a property in Beverly Hills, because it was too noisy. Of course, he often went back to the UK to rest for a while, and he didn't care where he lived. Chapter 689. Come on, The Prestige. Please subscribe and vote. On this day, in Nolan's apartment, on the sofa in the hall, Christian Bale smiled and raised his hand. The script is not finished yet, but I feel that the character image is more full than in the first film. On the side, Jonathan twisted his waist to stretch his body after sitting for a long time, and laughed. Of course, if there is no change, what's the point of filming the same story routine? Lyman specifically instructed that the design should be more detailed. As he was talking, the door of the study opened, and Nolan came out. Christian Bale greeted him seriously. "Hi, Director Nolan." Nolan's expression softened, and he sat on the sofa. "No need to be so polite, just be casual. This filming will be difficult for you. We found a stronger opponent for you." Jonathan laughed and echoed, "Yeah, don't be outshone by the role. When the time comes, this role has a lot of room for development." Christian Bale also laughed, but didn't answer. Nolan nodded and said, "You have to prepare well this time. There are more fighting scenes than in the previous film." Bale groaned and nodded, as if he didn't mean to say, "It's easy to play a repetitive role. I've been training recently. The key is what Warner says. How can we worry about this? Lyman will have a way. He asked us to conceive the script first. We can't fail to handle it." Jonathan took over Bale's topic and looked at Nolan. "Brother, have you received any news? Didn't Warner look for you several times?" "They looked for me." Nolan shook his head. "No good intentions." Bale lowered his head and sighed. What can they do about the matter involving two studios? The atmosphere was a little silent. After a while, Jonathan spoke up. "I went to the company yesterday and met Lyman. He said he was already negotiating. This topic was not discussed further because it involved too many things and was not convenient to talk about." Nolan suddenly looked at Bale and sighed in his heart. Although he is not a comic book fan, he can adapt such a project, inject his own thoughts and insights into it, and gradually improve it. He can get a sense of joy and satisfaction in the process. He can say that he enjoys it, but Bale is different. Most actors may not have much passion for playing repetitive roles, but he is not easy to persuade in similar matters. Lyman is waiting in the company's office, waiting for Warner's reply. He has indeed started to negotiate and conveyed the new terms through Joseph to retreat slightly from the original conditions and wait for Warner's response. Logically, this is definitely a great opportunity. As long as you show your willingness to talk, Warner will not miss it. Sure enough, Little Miss Sunshine did not make any waves in overseas regions because of regional cultural differences and the fact that it is a plot-oriented work. It has not exceeded 10 million after being released for a month. Of course, if you only look at the North American market, the cumulative results are still very good. The momentum of the screening has declined, and it has begun to be withdrawn one after another. The North American box office of $68.42 million, compared with the expenditure of less than $25 million US, makes the entire Blue Butterfly Pictures very happy. It's not about how much money can be made, but the film itself is very scarce. The meaning is different when the project has great potential, even though no one is optimistic about it. The reason why Little Miss Sunshine, a family comedy, can create such a momentum in North America and have a higher box office than in the past is very simple. The schedule arrangement and the relatively good theater resource investment set at the beginning, plus the very topical publicity and the quality of the film itself that deserves the hype, undoubtedly pushed Little Miss Sunshine to another height. After all, Fox in the original time and space did not invest in resources like Firefly at the beginning. It was completely because the subsequent trend of the film was too stable that it pushed it belatedly, but the potential for screening at the most golden time had been delayed. You know, the most intuitive manifestation of the North American film market after the new millennium is the reduction of the screening cycle. It was common for good movies to be screened for 3 or 4 months in the past, but now there is basically no market worth investing in for 1 or 2 months. First, the entry of capital has led to more intense competition and increased film production. Second, information transmission is more convenient, which is the influence of the internet. Finally, Little Miss Sunshine is somewhat different from the previous promotion point. With the market appeal accumulated by Lyman over the years, the momentum of the movie was hyped before it was released, which made the film start more smoothly and easier to gather word of mouth. In short, the project is profitable. When the film was released, another thing was also pushed into the work arrangement, that is, the distribution of the accounts by all parties. Little Miss Sunshine took $68.42 million in North America and $9.85 million overseas, with a total box office of $78.27 million. Among them, North American theaters took $27.36 million. The main creative team was rewarded $3 million, and there were project expenses and other miscellaneous losses. The net profit of the film was $12.06 million. Overseas, it was very little. This kind of movie itself is a type that cannot be sold overseas, and it is estimated that it can get $1.5 million. Then, Little Miss Sunshine can bring Firefly about $13.56 million in box office alone. According to the algorithm of at least 2.5 times the flying profit, it is still, because Little Miss Sunshine is limited by the subject matter and the peripherals cannot be sold at a high price. Therefore, based on 2 years, it can at least bring Firefly no less than $47.46 million in total project revenue. However, Lyman's attention is not on the work of Little Miss Sunshine at this time. The company's employees are already familiar with similar processes. This week, with the release of The Prestige approaching, the preheating publicity has already begun. Both paper media and the internet, 2 voice platforms, have arranged similar publicity drafts. As for advertisements, posters, and trailers, they are also laid out at the same time to ensure that the audience can learn about such a movie as soon as possible. Marketing, it is always inseparable from 2 central points. One is to let the audience know the information, and the other is to make the audience interested in the information. The point of interest is the slogan of the main creative team and Batman and Wolverine co-starring and competing on the same stage. After all, the roles of Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman in the film are indeed a pair of magicians competing with each other. The topic of competing on the same stage is not a deception, but just a way to get the image heat. Fox also acquiesced to this, who let the 2 companies have a good relationship. Otherwise, it might not be so easy to talk about the matter of riding on the popularity. After all, every outstanding character in the X-Men series is a valuable asset of Fox. Lyman's arrangement easily aroused the interest of at least several fan groups. One category is the fans of the individual actors, who will definitely support the new play. The second category is the fans of Nolan's director. This director has not been unknown since his debut, so it is very normal for someone to like him. The third category is some fans of DC and some fans of the X-Men series. Seeing familiar faces can also arouse curiosity. Subsequently, Blue Butterfly Pictures immediately held a press conference and pulled into leading actors to further ride on the image of the hotspots, inviting several familiar media to use photos of the 2 people posing together to hype up another wave of hype. In short, it is to release the news of the new film to the greatest extent so that more people can receive it. Regardless of what others think or how the big 6th Street Firefly, North American theater chains, seeing the momentum and the film's possible commercial value, have begun to make room for The Prestige. Of course, the arrangement is an arrangement, and the resources allocated are not too much, but this is the most favorable condition that Blue Butterfly can get. In this September schedule, it is still very important. 2,450 screens and 27% of the schedule are definitely not bad. Moreover, if the performance is good in the first weekend, it can be increased, which is also the usual practice of theater chains. In North America, after more than half a month of publicity and constant hype, many audiences are looking forward to the film. Again, the combination of Nolan plus Christian Bale plus Hugh Jackman has great appeal. For competitors showing in the same schedule, it is also a work that needs to be treated with caution. Of course, similar momentum attracts not only interested audiences, but also Warner. Because of the Batman project, they love and hate Firefly. When the new film is released, they will inevitably cast their eyes on it and use the performance as a reference for the next negotiation. All of this will be witnessed by the market. Chapter 690, The difference between a team and a tool. Please subscribe and vote. Carla took out the prepared cheering signs at home and put a photo album in her backpack. This was her preparation just in case. After all, she had finally managed to get a ticket to the premiere of The Prestige. If she went to the scene, she would most likely meet her favorite actors and stars. As for whether she could strike up a conversation or get an autograph, it would depend on luck, but she couldn't be unprepared. The 16-year-old girl went out happily, joined a few friends who also got tickets, got on the bus, and headed towards the Grand Theater. After getting off the bus, Carlot was still thinking, I came so early, I should be able to get a good seat. If I could stand closer, my chances would definitely be greater. With such expectations, she went to the open space in front of the theater and felt a little disappointed at a distance. There was no other reason, there were just too many people. No matter how hard they squeezed, they couldn't get to the front. My companion complained, I told you to come early, let's go. Who knew that there would be no good seats even 2 hours in advance? Forget it, we're here now, we can't go back. Think of some way to stand a little further forward. Let's not talk about how many fans the slogan of Blue Butterfly Pictures attracted. Anyway, Lyman believes that this premiere is very large and the atmosphere is good. In the waiting area, Lemon is chatting with Nolan, and the chat is quite speculative. Lemon is close to this director, who directs a variety of themes from the bottom of his heart. At least in his opinion, Nolan must be regarded as a famous Hollywood director of the new era with ambition, integrity, and ability. Although some literary and artistic youths always mock Nolan's movies for being full of stock market mercenaries, the general public is not willing to watch them when they really play with depth. In terms of combining the market with ideas, Nolan is already one of the most outstanding directors. When you watch his movies, you rarely feel that they are too vulgar or too elegant. This is his ability. Unlike Jonathan Dayton, who had a relationship with Firefly because of a temporary collaboration, Nolan is a true descendant in Lemon's heart. To put it simply, the success of Little Miss Sunshine is difficult to replicate. It is a work that was produced by many factors that happened to come together, plus some inspiration. Jonathan Dayton, as the director of this film, is more like a toolman. Do you say he has no ability? He has a solid foundation and has experience on the set, but if you insist on saying that he is very good, it is a little bit off. In other words, as a director, he cannot guarantee whether his project can achieve the results he expected and the restoration of his shooting ideas. It is quite coincidental, but Nolan, James Wan, Zack Snyder and other directors are relatively successful directors who have ideas and can implement them. They have their own system for shooting. Therefore, from the perspective of Lemon and the company's future, Nolan can give great support. External publicity can always be tied to the company's label. If there are problems or new shooting plans, he is very obliged to help. But tool directors can't do that. They can only say that they are suitable for a certain project. If there are any problems, Firefly will probably have to see the situation before deciding whether to support them. Direct lineage can be regarded as a small group of confidants, and non-direct lineage means that there is such a person. If you think of it, you may be able to use it. If you don't think of it, it doesn't matter if you throw it aside. As for people, whether from the perspective of social relations, or limited energy, and limited scope of activities, it is reasonable to distinguish between relatives and strangers. If you treat a stranger the same as your family, then there is something fishy. After chatting for a while, Lemon saw that Narlan seemed to be worried, and not in a good mood, so he couldn't help asking, "Narlan, have you encountered something difficult to deal with? Can you tell me about it?" Narlan frowned slightly, and he did have a headache. He repeated what Christian Bale said to him that day. The general meaning was that the second part had not yet started shooting, and the leading actor was a little resistant, and not in a good mood. I didn't know how to persuade him, and couldn't handle it, so I was a little irritable, and I might have some concerns about the prestige. After all, this was his second time directing such a high investment project, so I couldn't say that I was particularly confident. Pre-release phobia? Most directors have it. The audience and the market will speak for this part. But what can I say about Bale as an actor? This guy's really the type with a weak desire for fame and fortune. If he were an ordinary actor, he would be eager to get a role as popular as Bruce Wayne, but this guy could only do it after the trilogy. When Warner asked him to continue playing Batman, he firmly refused. He didn't take the opportunity to raise his price or anything, but simply didn't want to act, and didn't like it. If he hadn't signed 3 drama contracts, he might have quit. So, Lemon could only try it out, and replied, "It's not surprising that he has such a mind. He has the concept of an old school actor. Don't worry, I will communicate with him." Narlan's attitude towards Christian Bale is similar to the relationship between Lemon and Cage. They are both friends who appreciate and get along well. Although cooperation will be affected by the pay and the role, it does not hinder the two peoples getting along privately. Speaking of this, Lemon immediately went to talk to Bale. Bale didn't expect Lemon to come to him, and greeted him with a smile, and quickly stood up to make some polite remarks. He didn't hate the role as much as Narlan said, but he certainly didn't like it. At best, he just regarded this play as a job, and it was fine after completing it. How to encourage this guy's enthusiasm? Lemon didn't have many ways, so he had to talk about the project. He said that his performance in this play was more difficult, and if he couldn't control it, the main and secondary would be unbalanced. Bale echoed a few words, but I don't know if he listened. However, when the filming begins, and Batman and the Joker play against each other, he may understand what Lemon said today. Afterwards, the group took a car to the Grand Theater. The routine red carpet, flashing lights, cheers, and screams. The hot atmosphere on the scene was undoubtedly revealed. The main creators of the Prestige still have some influence. There were dozens of police and security guards on the scene to maintain order. Recently, Eva went back to France again, and Lemon passed the red carpet area quickly by himself. Entering the hall, Lemon also saw a few familiar faces of Warner management personnel. However, he didn't greet them specially, because in addition to Warner, many Fox executives also came, and this part is what Lemon needs to entertain the most. The preview is about to begin, and everyone did not exchange too many pleasantries, and quickly sat down. Lemon took Narlan, Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale and Scarlett Johansson, who played the assistant role in the play, to sit in a slightly forward seat. Scarlett was willing to get to know Lemon, but there was not much familiarity between the two. Even when she thanked Lemon for recommending the project her, she was still polite. This made her a little depressed. However, looking at the almost full screening room around her, and the film critics and media reporters from various newspapers, she felt an inexplicable expectation in her heart. Being able to act with 2 first-line male actors is indeed an opportunity for Scarlett at this time to quickly accumulate qualifications. Even her agent was sighing at her good luck. You know, after the huge failure of Escape from the Island, the acting career of Ewan McGregor, a popular young actor in the same crew, has plummeted. He went from working with Oscar winner Nicole Kidman and getting a role in Star Wars 3 to participating in niche literary and artistic works such as The Nature of Sex and Ms. Potter. The deviation in his treatment and the status of being favored by resources are obvious to all. Of course, if you insist on saying that he is honing his acting skills, it is not wrong, but as an award-winning literary and artistic film, Moulin Rouges are some of the movies he has taken in the past few years, and Scarlett seems to have been unaffected at all. To be honest, her salary has dropped a lot, but she can still get good projects. The comparison itself seems not so important. The lights went out one by one, the scene became quiet, and everyone's minds gradually turned to the big screen. They wanted to know what kind of movie this would be. Is it Nolan, another market masterpiece of Firefly, or Chapter 691 Deadly Magic? The short and psychedelic animated logo appeared and disappeared. George's heart could not help but surge in his seat. The complex feeling of mixed expectation and excitement made him quite restless, but his eyes never moved away from the screen, for fear of missing any details. Nolan's film is one of the directors with the strongest sense of picture in his opinion. The complexity of the shots also requires people to invest a lot of energy, otherwise it is easy to not understand. In other words, this director's style pays great attention to the layout of the film, and he likes to start from the details, which makes people ignore the characters. This is very different from the leading director of Firefly, Lyman. As an amateur film critic, George, who only occasionally contributes and has no columns, has already noticed this director who seems to be very spiritual. After the opening, the film opened with a round hat and a tuxedo performing magic on the stage. His technique is very skillful, step by step to seduce the audience's interest, and won everyone's applause. Backstage, an old magician tells a little girl about his understanding of magic. He says that every performance can be divided into 3 steps. The first is to use the virtual to bring out the real, to show any ordinary things with superb techniques, such as a bird or a bouquet of flowers, and no matter how the audience checks it, or stares at it closely, it can only be real, even if it will be fake later. The second is to steal the day, to use ordinary things, or to guide the atmosphere, or to use props, to make a seemingly amazing performance, and to make the audience unable to find other keys, even if they know it in their hearts, but they can't see it with their eyes. The last is to turn the stale into the magical, the prestige, which is the title of the movie Fatal Magic. Stage, magic, cheers. Just when the audience thought the plot was going to continue, the famous magician and Hugh Jackman fell into the water tank under the stage while performing a trick to escape from a difficult situation, but because the lock of the water tank prop was replaced by a real lock, he could not escape and drowned. All of this was seen by Andre's Edge's mortal enemy, another rising magician, Borden, Christian Bale. Because of the unclear motives of the two and his presence at the scene, Borden was brought to court by the police as the biggest suspect. Although the evidence could not prove that he killed Andre's Edge, it could not exonerate him. After the trial, Borden was thrown into prison. It is said that, because of his non-cooperation, he is likely to be sentenced to death. To quell the death of magicians in the public eye, in less than 10 minutes, one male protagonist died, and the other male protagonist also faced death after judicial trial. This really caught the audience off guard. Too fast, with such a small part, Wolverine and Batman are gone. But, this is just the beginning. A gentleman came to the prison to visit Borden. He claimed to be working for a knight who liked magic, and wanted to buy the secret of Borden's famous work shape-changing. Don't let this great magic disappear from the world. That's what he said, but Borden was very stubborn. No matter how the man persuaded him, even offering a large sum of money, he refused to sell. The gentleman was very angry and threatened, saying that after you die, your daughter will be sent to an orphanage or even become a child laborer. Do you want to see this result? Borden was disdainful and said confidently that his assistant Fallon would take good care of my daughter, and you don't have to worry about it. But the gentleman reminded him, don't forget, he is just your assistant. Even if you have cooperated for many years, he is still an outsider, and he can't get custody. After that, the gentleman took out a notebook and gave it to Borden, saying it was a gift from the knight, and asked him to think it over. After the man left, Borden opened the notebook and found a set of word puzzles in it. It was strange, and he always felt that something was hidden. Because the techniques and processes of shape shifting recorded by Borden were also in the mode of word puzzles plus symbols, in order to prevent people from stealing it, cracking his famous work, and revealing the mystery. Seeing this, the audience was even more confused. Jazz and Guy, Borden, what roles did these people play in this? And who killed Guy? As a somewhat suspenseful film, The Prestige raised everyone's expectations with just an opening transition. Then, there is a flashback. In fact, this movie is a narrative mode that alternates between flashbacks and interpolations. Compared with direct narration, it looks more laborious, which is also one of the factors that affect the film's not very popular. After all, it takes patience to watch this movie, but many people have lost their patience in their complicated work and life. It is normal not to be liked if you spend an hour or two playing a routine similar to finding the answer to the puzzle. Time, back to Britain in 1894. In the theater, Borden and Angie are just novice magicians who have just debuted, watching the performance of an old magician. During the period, the two took the initiative to go on stage as staff, looking for flaws for the audience at close range, and helping the magician to perform the escape magic and tie up a beautiful woman. During the preparation process, Angie also secretly kissed the beauty's thigh, and later, she became Angie's wife. After being tied up, in front of many audiences, the beauty was hoisted into the air, and then fell into the water tank in the middle of the stage. The curtain was closed. In a flash, the magician said a few guiding words, making the audience worry whether the beauty in the water tank would die, and then confidently signaled Angie to open the curtain. Sure enough, the performance was very successful. The beauty stood on the stage again. Except for being soaked, she was not injured at all. The audience was surprised at how she got out of the big water tank, and applauded in admiration. Magic is like this. Even if you know it is fake, you can't see it, but you will still feel shocked. The veteran magician took off his hat and saluted, and returned to the backstage amid applause. At this time, Angie and Borden talked and laughed with the magician. It turned out that in the previous performance, they were just pretending to be passers-by, and they actually knew how to cooperate with this magic. After all, the water tank has a secret door that can be opened, but the method of tying the rope is equally important. It is tied into a dead knot, and there is no way to escape, and this cannot be expected from the audience who don't understand it at all. Afterwards, the group drank to celebrate the success of the performance. However, Borden said that it was not innovative to keep doing it like this, and the audience would see through it. Then the magic would be useless and embarrassing. He believed that as magicians, they should keep innovating instead of just performing these clichés. Angel and the old magician laughed at Borden, and said that the principle of magic was deception, and how to deceive the audience was the most important thing. Could you invent a magic that others could never see through or imitate? Borden was not convinced and vowed that he would be able to do it in the future. Then, he proposed to improve the knot of the escape magic and use the strong Helen's knot, because in the previous performance, the actress hanging in the air almost fell prematurely due to the mistake of the stage staff. It was too dangerous. But the old magician warned him that the knot was strong, but it was also difficult to break free. What if there was an accident in the water tank? It was better to use a slipknot. No one took this seriously, except Borden. One day, Borden and Angel went to watch the performance of another magician, whose unique skill was to conjure up large utensils, such as water tanks and teapots. But Angel and Borden soon discovered the secret of this magic. But knowing it is difficult to imitate it. Because this magician made a great sacrifice for the performance, and set himself up as a person with inconvenient legs and feet. Whether during the performance, or after the performance, he walked with a limp to hide the props hidden in his crotch between the white costumes. In prison, Borden saw the notes about the sacrifice for magic mentioned by the knight, and couldn't help laughing, which reminded him of something. Back then, he performed as an assistant in a very small theater, pretending to be a baby. The magic was a magic in which a birdcage was covered with cloth, then disappeared, and then the birdcage reappeared. The technique is simple, but the difficulty is to create an atmosphere. After all, it can be done by using props and hiding in space, but how to win applause still requires some verbal skills. Chapter 692 Deadly Magic. Second. Questions, curiosity, and even a strong urgency to uncover the mystery. George had already entered the world of magic while sitting in his seat. He knew that Borden would not be a simple person, because the old magician once said that he was a natural magician. But how was he superior to others? Up to now, the movie has not given an answer, but perhaps it has given one, hidden in some details. After the bird reappeared, a little boy cried sadly. Borden tried to comfort him and asked him if he had encountered any sad things. The little boy pointed at the bird while crying and said, "This one is not the one I just saw. It must have been shot to death by you." Borden smiled and said to the little boy's wife, "Your son is really smart." The woman shook her head and said, "He is my nephew." Afterwards, Borden dealt with the body of the prop bird backstage. The one shown at the beginning was indeed dead, but it was not shot to death, but was suffocated to death in the sleeve. Stealing the sky and changing the day, a very simple technique. Later, Borden mastered more magic, and his guiding words and hand skills became more and more proficient. He also fell in love with a woman and got married. One day, it was time for the magician to perform the escape trick again. The actress, who was now Andras Edge's wife, looked at Borden for a few times before being tied up. During the eye contact, Borden tied a blues knot. Soon, the water tank was pushed out, and when the magician pressed the stopwatch, the actress fell into the water tank and was covered with a curtain. The audience was expecting, but after waiting for a long time, no miracle happened. The magician standing on the stage was a little panicked. This situation had never happened before, which made him feel very bad. He quickly pulled down the curtain, and everyone saw only the pale face of the actress and a rope that could not be broken. Amid the panic shouting, the water tank was smashed open, but it was too late. Andras Edge's wife suffocated due to lack of oxygen. At the actress's funeral, Andras Edge, who had not rested well for several nights, opened his bloodshot eyes, blaming himself, doubting, and then questioning. Why was it a blues knot? He looked at his good friend Borden, with some disbelief in his anger. However, Borden was so confused in the face of these, and could only answer that he didn't know. Did he really not know? The audience was also confused, because it was indeed Borden who tied the knot, but it seemed that the actress also agreed. But even if he agreed, he should have been responsible. Why did he escape and pretend so much? The black question mark on his face showed that it was after this funeral that the friends who had studied together had an inexplicable hatred. When Borden really performed magic on a large stage independently, he recruited an assistant named Fallon from somewhere. After several collaborations, the two were so familiar with each other that they could understand each other's meaning with just a glance. This tacit understanding surprised Borden's wife. After a while, his wife was pregnant. When Borden knew it, he was ecstatic. His wife was hugged by him, feeling his love and warmth, and asked him if he loved her. Borden looked into her eyes and answered very sincerely, "I love you." His wife was a little surprised by this answer. She said, "Sometimes I really think you love magic more than me, but you seem different today." After hearing his wife's heartfelt words, Borden's reaction was strange, as if he had done something wrong that night. Borden performed magic in a theater again. This magic was to let an audience member shoot at him with a pistol, and the gun filled with ammunition would only be an empty gun. In fact, this magic only requires some tricks when loading the ammunition. But when looking for a backer, Angie, who was dressed up with a fake beard, took the initiative to go on stage to volunteer. After he got the gun, he did not proceed as planned as he wished, but pointed the gun directly at Borden and asked whether Borden had tied the blues knot that day. Borden still said that he knew nothing. The assistant Fallon found that something was wrong and wanted to stop it, but Angie had already pulled the trigger. A gunshot sounded, and Borden's left hand was shot. After treatment, he permanently lost 2 fingers. After that, the two of them started to argue. Either you make trouble, or I expose some tricks of magic in public. This made both of them want to create new magic. Finally, Borden took this step first. In a theater performance, Borden, who had lost 2 fingers and was wearing black gloves, performed a great magic trick that would be remembered forever: apparition. The magic requires 2 doors on the stage with a large distance between them. Borden first threw a small red ball, then opened one of the doors and entered. In less than 2 or 3 seconds, he came out of the other door and caught the thrown ball. From the audience's perspective, it was as if Borden used magic such as wall walking or flash. Otherwise, how could he enter from one door and come out from that door with such a short interval in between? Such a performance was of course a success. The audience suspected that there must be some skills that they could not think of. but their eyes told them that they could not imitate it, so everyone's applause and cheers naturally belonged to Borden. For a time, he was also praised as the greatest magician, and countless people wanted to see him perform apparition up close and be impressed by him. After Borden gained great fame, Angie was very unhappy. He didn't want to see a man who indirectly killed his wife enjoying fame and fortune without any guilt. But every time he watched Borden perform shape-changing, Andrzej really didn't understand what kind of technique or props and mechanisms could be used to accomplish such a magical thing. If he couldn't expose it, he couldn't stop Borden's continued success. After thinking about it, an old mechanism master thought that Borden must have used a substitute because the two doors were too far apart, and even if there was a mechanism to connect them, it would take time. It was impossible to complete it in just a few moments, and so calmly. But Andrzej always believed that Borden used a technique unknown to his predecessors, which was an innovation. His team was at a stalemate, but seeing Borden becoming more and more famous, even overshadowing Andrzej, they always needed to save the magic career. There was no way. With the help of the mechanism master, they found a man who looked very similar to Andrzej, and with make-up and deliberate dressing, he was still able to confuse the audience. On this basis, Andrzej's team also launched a magic similar to shape-changing, which successfully curbed the gradually declining fame. But Andrzej's stand-in has a bad personality, often asking for more money, and has a bad habit of alcoholism. Even during the performance, he often does not follow the preset plan. His existence is not a stabilizing factor at all. More importantly, Andrzej always thinks that his magic is not as good as Borden. After that, Andrzej injured and sent his female assistant, the character played by Scarlett, to Borden's team as a spy, to find out the secret behind shadow changing. However, the female assistant betrayed Andrzej, and told Borden all this as a bargaining chip. Borden said, "I actually knew it, but I never bothered him. Since he did it, I can't pretend it didn't happen." Soon, when Andrzej was performing magic, Borden went backstage and took away the mechanical props under the floor and the cushions to prevent injuries, causing Andrzej to break his leg. After the magic failed, he ran to the stage and mocked him, saying that he couldn't even imitate well. An angry Andrzej found the female assistant and asked him why he betrayed himself. In order to protect herself, the female assistant said that she was trying to find out the news and took out a notebook from her body, claiming that it was Borden's secret. But the notebook was full of characters and numbers, which Angel couldn't understand at all. For this reason, he kidnapped Fallon and got the keyword about shape-shifting written by Borden himself, Tesla. Tesla is a well-known physicist. Angel also found out from the investigation that the alternating current discovered by Tesla was madly suppressed by the direct current discovered by Edison, and was regarded as an outlier by the mainstream scientific community. Angel didn't care whether it was an outlier or not. After he ran to the United States to find Tesla, he visited a machine with a strange shape. After some experiments and carefulness, he found that this machine had the ability to copy. At the same time, Borden seemed to fall in love with the female assistant, and his relationship with her became increasingly close. Phew, the update can be resumed. Chapter 693, The Fatal Magic, Part 3. The more George watched, the more he felt that the relationship between Borden and his female assistant was strange. Sometimes they were very close, but sometimes they were distant. Perhaps, as Borden's wife lamented, he had a disease similar to schizophrenia. Then, such a foreshadowing finally broke out, with a kind of sadness that did not disappoint expectations. Under Borden's seemingly calm appearance, there was a deep pain. When the plots, the constant flashbacks and memories, began to converge, the storylines began to intertwine, until it was pushed to this moment. The real theme of the Prestige was presented to the audience through magic. Patient and careful viewing has become the basis for watching this film. The wife's puzzled questioning and the quarrel over the breakdown of the relationship. After the affair, the two were in a cold war, but it was Fallon who took good care of their daughter. The wife realized something and hanged herself because she could no longer bear it. The scene changed, and Ungi returned to England with the machine invented by Tesla and continued to perform magic. This time, he did not have a stand-in to help him, but still completed the most sensational miracle performance. Borden, who lost his wife, became more paranoid. Seeing that Andrzej's fame was about to surpass his, he wanted to reveal the secret of the magic. However, no matter how he looked at it, or bribed the team members, he seemed to find no flaws, until he found that after each performance, someone would quietly carry away a large box from behind the stage. Borden felt that all the secrets should be hidden behind this, otherwise Andrzej wouldn't have to hide so much and not let outsiders interfere. In the end, Borden, who couldn't figure out the magic tricks, couldn't help but pretend to be an audience member and sneak onto the stage to check the machine. When everyone's attention was attracted, he quickly sneaked into the backstage. Under the stage, there was only a blind old man sitting, and in front of him was a large water tank. When Andrzej on the stage performed magic, the floor props started, and Andrzej would fall down and fall into the water tank. Borden just watched Andrzej struggling in the water tank, but he couldn't open the lock. Yes, this is a real lock that is automatically buckled, and it can't be opened without a key. Then, Andrzej drowned, his wife also drowned, and the only witness, Borden, was the most suspicious, and was arrested and imprisoned, just like at the beginning. After being imprisoned, the knight finally came to meet Borden in person. But when they met, Borden was very emotional. Although he was dressed differently, the man did look exactly like Andrzej. In other words, the knight didn't know how to frame Borden for murder, and took Borden's daughter with him to show that he had obtained custody and would take good care of her. Borden nervously took out a stack of paper from his pocket, wanting to use the secret of disapparition to beg for mercy from his former opponent. But Andrzej didn't even look at it, and directly tore up the paper, declaring in a condescending manner, "I won. You will repent everything you did in hell." A few days later, Fallon also came to visit Borden. Borden said some goodbye words, then threw the red ball he carried with him to Fallon, and calmly accepted his fate. That night, he was hanged. Borden's wife also died by hanging. After Borden died, Fallon found the knight and shot him. In the bewilderment of the jazz, Fallon tore off his disguise, revealing the face of Borden. It was also at this time that many truths were revealed. Borden and Fallon looked similar. After choosing the path of magic, the person who taught them kept this secret for them. In order not to be seen through by anyone, the two took turns using the identity of Borden. Even after one person broke 2 fingers on his left hand, the other resolutely amputated his fingers to maintain the same disability. But the same appearance, temperament will still be different. In addition to investing energy in magic, there are always some flaws, which is why the wife lamented schizophrenia. In addition, the two of them, one likes his wife, and the other likes his female assistant. And that night, the wife finally thought of this possibility, and found that there was another person who accompanied her day and night, and slept with her, and then she broke down and committed suicide. Rather than saying that he committed suicide because of an affair, it is better to say that it is a huge contrast, and being deceived all the time, and even physical and mental cleanliness. It was only after killing the jazz that Fallon said to himself, self-sacrifice is the price of wonderful magic, but how can you understand this? The jazz was dying, and fell into memories. In order to trick Bourdain, he had to drown himself once every time he performed. Who can understand such pain? Moreover, the meaning of magic lies in deception, allowing the audience to escape from the cruel reality, while gaining spiritual joy. In other words, they don't want to know the truth so much, they just enjoy being deceived at that moment. Did you really look carefully? The murmured narration fell, and the big screen fell into darkness. The movie is over. Is this Nolan's new work? George looked at the rolling credits on the big screen after it lit up again, and he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. The theme of magic, self-sacrifice and persistence, and the very exquisite line-dividing narrative mode. There is no lack of foreshadowing and reversal of suspense clues. It can only be said that after several works, Nolan's control over the film has become more and more mature and has a more personal image style. You know, the most successful Batman Begins actually relied on the power of the Batman Mountain. Although the box office and word of mouth are very good, it can't be said to be amazing. After all, no matter how he shoots, he can't escape the various influences of Batman on the film, whether good or bad. But The Prestige is different. It doesn't need to compromise the existing character image, and it doesn't need to create a rough Batman for comic fans. It is Nolan's more self-interpretation. In other words, Nolan, who injected a dark color into Batman Begins, began to squander his talent unscrupulously in such suspenseful and sci-fi works. In the screening room, the audience applauded affirmatively. George was also very grateful to see such a satisfying movie tonight. In the dim light, he glanced at the figure sitting in front of him, and closed to Lyman. I really look forward to what he will shoot next. George couldn't help thinking so. He is a big fan of this complex and strong personal style. But not every audience will like it. In fact, even though the premiere was attended by fans who were looking forward to the director and the main creators, some people still left during the screening of The Prestige, not just one or two. Nolan himself also noticed this scene. He has watched his own film countless times, so he has devoted a lot of energy to observing the audience's feelings about the film. Therefore, unlike the applause of the crowd, although he is also happy, he is still worried whether The Prestige will be accepted by the market and recognized by the audience. And Lyman also has some feelings about the film. From the perspective of later generations, The Prestige is not Nolan's best work in his career, and it can even be said to be his earlier exploration work. Strictly speaking, the whole film has many flaws. For example, the replicator with a sci-fi color has some force bugs in such a rigorously structured suspense film. For example, the theme of the film is to use magic to talk about the discussion of sacrifice. It probably means that when you see someone do something that seems very simple and succeed, you think that he has some tricks, and it is effortless to do it. It's like being noble in front of people, but suffering behind their backs. This kind of thinking can be brought into many places. Farmers have their own way of living, and emperors have their own way of living. It's ridiculous to only see the enjoyment part and ignore the part of giving and sacrifice, and imagine that the emperor uses a golden hoe to dig the soil. Of course, when he really saw the birth of this movie, Lyman himself was very emotional. Unlike Nolan, who was worried about the market, he saw a director making rapid progress. For a moment, he felt that Nolan's growth made him feel pressured. The movie is very good. Lyman encouraged seriously. Even if it is just an exploratory work, it can be better than most movies, and even if there are flaws, it is not unacceptable. Of course, Nolan's next answer also surprised Lyman. If I can shoot it again, I will definitely do better. Of course, I believe you. Chapter 694 Reception, Subscriptions, and Tickets Requested. Looking at Lyman, Nolan suddenly didn't know what to say. Sometimes, a person's intuition is very sensitive. Whether your words are perfunctory or polite, there is always a relatively accurate perception of the attitude conveyed. Just now, Nolan just sighed from the heart. He really felt that, if he could remake it, he would definitely do better. The Prestige has some flaws, and he knows it himself. But, how to say it? Lyman's undoubted answer also made Nolan realize his affirmation of himself at the first time, rather than the so-called comfort or a casual feeling. Perhaps, others would think he was bragging. But Nolan is a somewhat British stereotyped person in his bones. So, Lyman did not doubt it. And what was reflected to Nolan was his comfort with this sentence. Of course, I believe it. As a human being, there will be comparisons. Compared with the attitude of other studios towards him, Lyman was obviously sincere. This is also Nolan's choice. Perhaps, from the moment he rejected Warner, he had such thoughts. After the screening, it was the reception prepared by Blue Butterfly Pictures. The reception was naturally to make those media people and film critics have mercy on their words. As the saying goes, if you take someone's hand, you will be soft, and if you eat someone's mouth, you will be soft. If you do both, it will have an impact. At the banquet, everyone was in a good mood, and George was one of the others. However, his energy was no longer on the rich food and wine, but he often focused on the main creators of the crew and Lyman. Moreover, in addition to his recognition of the director and some pleasing elements shown in the film, George had to admit that the characters in it were also excellent. For example, the combination of Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, the confrontation between them produced a great positive chemical reaction. He was even a little surprised that he didn't see the shadow of Wolverine in Andra's Edge. For some embarrassing reasons, it was difficult for the male star to get rid of his image positioning in that series of comic adaptations. But the Prestige effectively concealed this point, instead of magnifying the difference. In addition, the performance of the new star Scarlett Johansson was also remarkable, but compared with this type of movie, he still felt that the literary and artistic atmosphere of the actress was wasted, and lost in translation was the work that sweeted her. If there is no attention, the already weak presence of a soy sauce role like the female assistant will be even weaker. It may be easy to ignore such a role after watching the whole film. In addition to the ubiquitous magic element, this film is just like the title, a work that turns decay into spirit. There are actually very few movies about magic, because magic itself is not a good subject for digging out a sense of drama, and how to properly use such a carrier to show something different is even more difficult. Fortunately, he thinks Nolan did a good job, and it is more amazing than the mystery of The Dark Knight. Taking 2 quick steps, Lyman came to Nolan and Lemon. "What's up?" Lemon looked at the stack of reports in his hand. "What's the matter?" "Well," Lyman replied, "it's detailed data about the audience on site. Although the base number collected is a little small, it can also show something, especially the most intuitive feeling after the movie has just been shown. In fact, the role of the premiere originally includes similar functions." Lyman, who had arranged it early in the morning, quickly collected information from several employees. Although the initial promotion strategy was oriented towards Batman and Wolverine, it did achieve good results. However, the promotion after the screening must not be done in the form of topic hype, but should be transformed into influencing and attracting specific mainstream audience groups, as well as analyzing the market. The fact that some audience members left the theater during the screening undoubtedly made Lyman a little worried. In case the reputation of the Prestige collapses or the prospects are not good, they can now find ways to reduce losses in advance. For some things, it is always good to have an extra plan and preparation. Although the performance of films produced by Firefly has always been good since 2004, I hope that it will be a good result if we prepare for a rainy day. He is still very optimistic about the future of the company and has high hopes for it. He also hopes that he can accumulate more power and realize his own value in such a team. He has roughly read this report. In simple terms, due to the audience's high expectations of Nolan, the reputation of the film is not so good, or it is a little mediocre. Obviously, the investment of $50 million, $40 million for production and $10 million for publicity is not very optimistic according to the data trend presented in this report. Lyman is already a little unsure whether the audience market will pay for this work, even though it is Nolan's new work after The Dark Knight. However, what he is worried about is that Lemon is calm and composed. After taking the report and flipping through it casually, he found that, if you like it, you will be very sure. Those who don't like this kind of subject matter will not be able to stick to 1/3 of the screening and feel boring and leave. In other words, the audience who can feel the suspense element will not be mentally repelled by the presentation in the form of magic. According to what Lyman just said, there are a total of 1,375 viewers, and about 98 of them left the theater until the end of the film. Excluding the off-site factors such as those who are in a hurry or are fans, it can be basically regarded as about 7% of the audience who have a bad impression of the film. In this way, if we make a bold prediction, the evaluation of the film by passers-by will appear to be a little larger, and close to 20% may be relatively close. Lemon handed back the report and said easily, "I still have expectations for the market prospects of the Prestige. The results may not be very impressive, but if it is going to lose money, such data will not mean anything." Lyman whispered, "I'm afraid that word of mouth will be bad and affect the audience's potential impression. This film does not have a popular character like Bruce Wayne, so its selling point should be the ingenious plot design, narrative mode and novelty of magic element. Lyman, what we have to do next is to guide some positive reviews. If the first week's results are good, we will have an advantage in subsequent public opinion, and it will not be difficult to win the market." Lyman nodded, knowing that his boss was still confident in the film. He also thought that there was no need to dampen the momentum of the screening too much, so he said, "I'll pay attention to guiding public opinion. Well, I'll go say hello to a few newspapers first, hoping to get a few more positive reviews. Also, the online aspect is also ready. It depends on whether the subsequent market performance can live up to the initial expectations. Lyman watched Lyman leave and was about to find a quiet place to rest when he saw Isaac, an executive of Fox, coming over. This person was not here for the screening of The Prestige. He simply said a few auspicious words and then changed the subject. "Mr. Last, our company really hopes to continue to cooperate with Firefly. Apart from movies, Firefly Pictures does not seem to have much interest in cooperating with us in terms of TV networks," Lyman said calmly. "Isaac, haven't we already cooperated on Breaking Bad? Have you forgotten?" No, I mean, we can cooperate more. If you have any good production plans, you can communicate with us more. We will definitely come up with cooperation conditions that will satisfy Firefly." Although Fox is already the fourth largest national TV network, they still have some gaps in foundation compared to the traditional three major players, ABC, NBC, CBS. For example, activities such as the Oscars, the Golden Globes, and even the Super Bowl, which are destined to have a large audience base, Fox rarely has the opportunity to get in on it. After all, decades ago, these three companies had already divided up similar public attention-grabbing profit cakes. Moreover, in terms of the most basic control of the number of local TV stations, Fox is still not far behind. In order to save money, or if Fox's program production level was not good, it would be questionable whether Fox TV network could develop. These factors have limited Fox's motivation to continue to move forward. Therefore, Fox attaches great importance to an excellent content provider. But Firefly does not seem to have the intention to continue to deepen the friendship. Isaac came here at this time with a tentative meaning. Of course, Firefly does not want to cling to the big tree of Fox. Who can say for sure whether the tacit understanding at this time will turn into enemies in the future? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 695, the same yet different theme of revenge. Please subscribe and vote. Although the plot is difficult to judge, movies need some dramatic conflicts. No matter whether it is novels, operas, music, etc., they all have similar effects. Director Nolan finally conveyed to the audience what is beyond the plot in his most intense language. Truth and kindness are the first element of life. In other words, this film has all the element of a movie, and the audience's vision, hearing, and perception are also filled. If I were to evaluate, the greatest magician in The Prestige is obviously not Andrzej or Borden, but director Christopher Nolan. So far, Christopher Nolan's films have generally highlighted the same theme, revenge, which is often associated with paranoia, loneliness, and abnormality. Just like the revenge of the protagonist with short-term memory loss in Memento, the revenge of the protagonist with insomnia in Insomnia, and the revenge of Bruce Wayne from the tragedy of his youth in Batman. In The Prestige, revenge is transformed into a tit-for-tat between the two protagonists, and the introduction to this tit-for-tat is precisely from the drowning of Andrzej's wife. And in The Prestige, Nolan once again demonstrated his exquisite operation of the film's narrative structure. The film begins with an analogy montage, linking the old prop master's explanation of magic to the girl with Andrzej's last performance, which is further forward in the timeline, completing the flashback opening. It is more smooth and free than the bombing flashback in Memento, echoing the theme, while completing the transition without a trace, and the film naturally transitions to the court part. It seems a bit obscure to say this, but from the entire structural axis, we can see how complicated the film's narrative mode is. This is a mixed narrative of flashback, interpolation, and direct narration, that many directors are trying, but find it difficult to play. Under the theme of revenge, the film also explores obsession and sacrifice. Obsession makes Andrzej and Bourdain constantly pursue improvement and reach the limit of magic, for which they have made extraordinary sacrifices. In addition, compared with Nolan's superb structural operation, in addition to carefully constructing amazing story content, many details hints are everywhere in the film, waiting for careful audiences to discover one by one. For example, the birdcage magic in the movie. This magic is the most important one in the whole movie. Borden's apparition is essentially no different from the birdcage magic, except that the cage becomes a door, one disappears and the other jumps out. It is also the cooperation of two birds and two people. Of course, due to the compact plot or other reasons, there are also some controversial points. For example, which angel is the real one after the replicator? In the later performances, each time he drowned in the props, just to seduce Borden to join the game. So, who died, was the replica or the main body? Also, Borden was hanged in the end. Was it the real Borden or the twin Fallon who died? The identity change between the two was random, so how to judge who is who between the two? Can the death of the wife be forgiven? Putting these aside, this movie is still very unique and wonderful. It can be said that the whole movie can be magic, but it is not magic. Interestingly, Tesla in the movie did exist in history. He was a colleague of Edison in his early years and was responsible for the development of DC generators at Edison Company, but he later invented AC with the funding of Westwood Company. Then it triggered a dispute between direct current and alternating current, and Tesla and Edison broke up and confronted each other. This historical event hidden behind the plot is somewhat similar to the plot. God knows how many secrets this movie has. In the end, if I were to sum it up in one line, it would be, do you really understand it? Atlanta Daily. With the promotion of Blue Butterfly Pictures and the affirmation of most film critics, the screening momentum of The Prestige has risen rapidly. In addition to the unstinting praise from the Atlanta Journal, Premiere also commented, if the movie is a magic trick, then it has achieved a kind of success that could only be achieved in the Victorian era. Although this is not a mainstream commercial film, it still brings sensory surprises to the audience. I don't know how Christopher Nolan coordinates all of this. Entertainment Weekly, however, there are also not so good reviews. Variety commented, it can be seen that director Nolan wants to explore more human things in the film, but it seems that he messed up, which affected the overall rhythm of the film. But the performances of the two leading actors, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, are worthy of praise. The New York Times said a little harshly, in terms of the viewing experience, the suspense is not entirely suspense, and the science fiction is not entirely science fiction. No matter from which aspect, it makes people feel boring and dull. Although the reversal in the last half hour is quite eye-catching, especially when Andras Edge pits Borden and thinks he has won the game, but is killed by Borden, it is still not outstanding overall. The voluminous texts and comments roughly show the mainstream media's perception of The Prestige, whether good or bad, from a side point of view. For Nolan, such a wide range of evaluations can be regarded as truly allowing him to break away from the ranks of unappreciated small directors and move towards the threshold of a top director. His talent has truly gained a place in Hollywood through the two works, The Dark Knight and The Prestige, and he is not a dispensable person. Before he became famous, who would pay attention to him? Are there really critics and media interested in films like Memento that can't even touch the box office of tens of millions? Of course not. But Nolan succeeded and became famous. Whether for topicality or traffic, someone will dig up everything behind him. Even the information of his family members has been dug up thoroughly. This is also a point of concern for famous people. From then on, the space for private life will be compressed even more. After the premiere, the audience market is the most needed to prove its reputation. The excitement on the internet and in the media newspapers is just used to guide the audience fans, and the box office is still implemented. As the most important work of Blue Butterfly Pictures in September, most of the energy and resources were invested in The Prestige under the guidance of the staff of the Publicity and Distribution Department. Following the route of driving performance with word of mouth and hyping up the momentum with actors, the performance of the theaters is also moving in this direction step by step. The topic of the film is injected into the audience level, and those who are interested will go to the theater to support it and then join the discussion and share their opinions. September 16th, Saturday. After the first day of the public screening, the premiere results of The Prestige were quickly released. In fact, Lyman went to sleep last night knowing the results of the film. The box office of $14.81 million US, nearly 60 million per theater, and the attendance rate maintained at about 80%. Although the screening data is not very outstanding, it still landed the daily box office champion with an unrivaled advantage in a period with worse data. Sometimes, the high and low box office needs to be set off by opponents. In other words, in mid-September, none of the studios had their trump cards, which made The Prestige seem to perform very well. Audiences generally follow the crowd. The movie that ranks first on the list easily attracts most people's attention. And for those in the industry, no one will forget that this is only the September schedule, and the market is a bit cold. The first day performance of $14.81 million is by no means bad, but it did not break any records. It is also worth mentioning that in the October schedule of the original Time and Space, there were excellent works such as Flags of Our Fathers and The Departed competing, but in September, there were movies that were not famous at all, such as Invincible, Disney, and The Prestige, Columbia. In comparison, the screening situation of The Prestige will only be better. This is indeed the case. Without many strong opponents, the box office of $13.35 million on the second day and $14.04 million on Sunday, with a total of $42.2 million US in 3 days, sat on the weekly box office champion without any obstacles, September 11th to September 17th. As a result, the first weekend box office was higher than the predicted data, which also gave Blue Butterfly Pictures more motivation for distribution. Chapter 696 Jason Reitman, subscribe, vote. On a warm afternoon, in the Firefly Pictures building, Garsha saw Lemon's assistant Metz staying outside the office and whispered, "Is there anything for the boss?" Metz nodded calmly. Although her salary was not high and her position in the company was not comparable to that of Garsha, a powerful producer, no one would offend her, because she was always with Lemon. Moreover, Metz would also be responsible for reminding and receiving visitors about Lemon's work arrangements and schedules. Therefore, even executives like Joseph would be very polite to her. Seeing Metz nod, Garsha asked with some interest, "Do you know who it is?" "It seems to be a director. The boss has been waiting for him for a while." "Director?" Garsha felt that he knew something. After all, he just received an internal call from the boss asking him to come over. And now he is going to meet a director. Does that mean that the company has a new project? I thought it was nothing big, but considering this situation, there may be new actions. As a producer, Garsha quickly made the connection. Because Firefly seldom deals with directors. To put it bluntly, Firefly usually does not invite directors to the company if there is no project, and once invited, there is basically a shooting plan. I wonder which director it is, and what he is good at. Garsha asked curiously. "What's Reitman?" Mays recalled carefully and then said, "Jason Reitman." "Oh, it's him." Garsha may understand. Unlike Mays, who rarely contacts industry personnel and has limited familiarity, Garsha often deals with such personnel. And to be able to receive a relatively close meeting with Reitman, it is impossible not to have achievements. Excluding some people with the same name, a very clear image quickly emerged. After all, there are always few people with ability, especially in a place like Hollywood, where achievements are the most important. Jason Reitman, born in 1977, is a Canadian. In 1988, he made his debut in Dragon and Tiger directed by his father Ivan Reitman. In 1989, he again participated in his father's movie Ghostbusters. In 1990, he began to work as a set assistant, turning from an actor to behind the scenes. In 2000, he filmed his first official feature film In God We Trust, which is a thriller. The results were a failure, but it accumulated experience for subsequent directing. Because of his father and his personal struggle, Jason Reitman is very experienced in the director circle. He wanders around major studios in the form of a studio, and has a very comfortable life. But even so, the boss of Firefly, Lemon, who has higher grades and qualifications than him, took the initiative to invite and greet him, and waited for him for several months in the middle. What kind of courtesy is this? Of course, the reason for waiting is that he has no schedule. Some time ago, he was busy directing and supervising the TV series The Office. It was a project he cooperated with NBC, and he needed to ensure the quality of the project. As soon as the project ended, he rushed to Firefly. After meeting, he also took the initiative to show his intimacy. Who in the industry doesn't know the name of Firefly? This studio already has the power to influence the schedule. As a director, he is naturally willing to make friends. This not only means opportunities for cooperation, but also more options. After exchanging pleasantries, Lyman sat down on the sofa opposite him. This director, who is close to his age, is worth waiting for. Of course, to be fair, Jason Reitman is a little famous in the circle, but not so famous that everyone knows him. Even in terms of level, he should only be considered a second-tier director, not even the top second tier. The reason why he can have such an attitude is that the film Juno is one of his masterpieces. This guy is very different from the action comedy style that his father Ivan Reitman focuses on. Most of the films he shoots prefer a more three-dimensional, more modern, and more sharp perspective, with humorous and witty ridicule, which makes the audience smile, while injecting some thoughts. In other words, Jason Reitman's films are mostly centered on the current real problems of American society. He chooses relatively marginal professions or themes, and shapes characters through complex and significant conflicts of values or psychological crises, showing the integration of non-mainstream values and mainstream life concepts. The characters in his films can be divided into two categories: physiological teenagers and psychological teenagers. They face life crises or severe conflicts of values, and then analyze and explore the problems of American society through their experiences and choices. In order to easily express these serious themes, his film language has outstanding personal characteristics in the use of close-up shots, triangular composition, music and fast editing. In short, if Juno wants to achieve the dark horse posture of its previous life, with high topic popularity and a large amount of box office, he is the most suitable director. After all, if it is only shot according to the script, it will undoubtedly make the movie too much. The subject matter focuses on the social status quo of teenage pregnancy and inability to raise children. It is already very sharp. Once it is not filmed well, it will inevitably become an accusation, and the viewing experience will be very heavy. And this kind of heaviness is not the type that the market can accept. People all have a rebellious mentality. The more you talk, the less people like to listen. What's more, it starts with a story about underage sex. Therefore, how to reduce the sharpness, not fall into the cliché comedy routine, and warn teenagers in a relaxed tone. It is not easy to achieve this level. In the original time and space, this film was invested by Searchlight, a studio that always likes to dig out low-cost works. Well, Little Miss Sunshine is also from this company. After inviting Jason Reitman, it took more than a month to produce with a budget of $6.5 million and earned more than $230 million worldwide. All these made Lyman willing to wait for him to vacate his schedule. After turning to the main topic, Lyman naturally took out the script project and invited him to take over the director position. Jason Reitman also knew that Firefly had a project for him. He roughly looked through the script and felt that it was pretty good, so he readily agreed. Director last, I really like the movie Daydreamer you shot. I have watched it several times and have long hoped to work with you. I didn't have the opportunity before, but now I have no reason to refuse. Lyman smiled and asked Mays to serve coffee. He had specially inquired about this person before. After all, if you intervene in a director's shooting trajectory too early, it is likely to change. But in 2005, this guy only shot a humorous comedy Thank You for Smoking, a story about a spokesperson for an association that promotes tobacco culture. In terms of style, this film is a little sharper than Juno, satirizing the inside stories of the three most profitable industries of guns, tobacco, and alcohol, but it is also shot in a funny way. In addition, this guy, like his movie style, maintains good interpersonal relationships. In other words, he doesn't have a very violent temper. Generally speaking, directors always have a bad temper. If they are not strong, they can't overwhelm the crew members. But there are always differences. Jason Reitman is a more casual director who doesn't like to be bound by constraints. This can be seen from his cooperation with many studios and his behavior of never being tied to anyone. So, although Jason seems to be easy to talk to and offers to be the director of Juno. If the cooperation plan given by Firefly is too harsh, he will definitely turn around and leave. Now, everyone is waiting. With the support of Firefly, in terms of style, it should be possible to achieve results that are not too far behind the previous life. His own director's salary is easy to talk about, just follow the rules. He only received less than $4.5 million including the share of the film Thank You for Smoking. The basic salary of $5 million for Juno is definitely enough, but this part is just the most basic. According to Lyman's idea, before the box office of the movie is released, no one can predict it so accurately except him. Jason Reitman certainly didn't know that the film could gain such audience support. Then, the division of interests requires some thought. It would satisfy Jason and Firefly would get the lion's share. After thinking for a while, Lyman said, "I'm very sure that you will be the director. After the project is approved, we will give you some support in the filming." Well, what do you think of a basic salary of $6 million plus a 10% share of the North American net box office? How about it? That would be very satisfying. After hearing this, Jason Reitman was excited and said a few polite words. He almost fell to his knees and hugged Firefly's thigh. Chapter 697 The price of being close or distant, subscriptions, votes. The price of maintaining a relatively free position is that no studio will invest first-class resources in Jason Reitman. Or, you are no longer here for a long time. Who has the patience to train you? Jason's foundation was laid with his father, and he gradually walked out of his own way. But to this day, he has not taken over any big productions. Oh, no, more than 90% of directors will not have the opportunity to direct, and this is normal for him. After all, the profession of director is still a place with high competition pressure like Hollywood. The most emphasized is performance and qualifications, and Jason's performance and project return rate are not very high. Most of the time, he barely makes back the cost and relies on time, a fline, to make a profit. At the same time, he has no big awards than the Oscars, Cannes, Berlin Film Festival and other places. Comprehensively speaking, he has always been on a low-cost route and often goes to the TV industry to do some projects besides filming. Therefore, if he really has no shortage of project production, a movie director probably doesn't look down on TV series, industry contempt chain, everywhere. He must feel comfortable when he was invited and treated with courtesy by Lyman. But it's not that urgent. He has his father's protection and is not short of money. Of course, this money refers to basic living security. He has a house, a car, food, and clothes. As for people, when their lives are guaranteed, they naturally pursue spiritual enjoyment. Being a director, not an actor, is his choice. Over the years, his output is not high, and he will only shoot one film every 2 or 3 years. Not only because good scripts and good projects are rare, but also because there are always differences in investment and treatment. If they can't reach an agreement, then naturally they can't cooperate. After all, this guy's studio has no distribution ability, and its production ability is also worrying, so it needs to cooperate with the production studio. The compensation plan offered by Lyman is already the highest one Jason Reitman has ever come into contact with. As for money, he would definitely be happy if he had more. But even so, there was a momentary impulse to hug thighs in his heart, but it quickly dissipated. He didn't even want to be tied to big companies like Fox and Universal, let alone Firefly. Lyman didn't care about this. If someone is willing to join, then naturally we welcome him. If he is not willing, then we will not force him. The reason why I give him a relatively high salary is that he is worth the price, and I want to make friends with him with goodwill. After all, this guy is a good director, and there will definitely be better opportunities for cooperation in the future. After chatting for a while and talking about the direction of the project shooting, Lyman said, "I will have people cooperate with you in preparation. Once you find the actors, just shoot directly. The best case scenario is that it can be released in theaters in March next year. Don't worry." Jason was even more satisfied that he didn't even interfere with the actors. As for the shooting and production, it will take nearly 5 months, so it can be completed anyway, and there is plenty of time. Therefore, the Juno project can be launched in this way. The investment budget is 11 million, which is 4.5 million higher than the 6.5 million in the previous life, mainly because of the increase in the director's salary. Of course, these increases are still small budget productions in terms of investment scale. The next day, after signing the formal director contract, Lyman asked Garsha to draft a project plan and let him serve as the project producer, mainly responsible for finance and crew management. After all, no matter how much you recognize the strength, there are still necessary restrictions, but it's not in the shooting aspect. As for the post-production, as long as you don't do it blindly, generally you won't interfere too much. Then, Eva, who was idle at home and had no shooting tasks, after shooting a few commercials, after returning from France, also came to find her after knowing that Juno was launched. Since she was encouraged by Lyman that day, she also wanted to develop behind the scenes. To be honest, in a place like Hollywood, producers who appear to be glamorous and have real power and resources have more prospects in production. The relationship between active and passive, smart people know what to choose. Of course, this does not mean that Eva will not be an actor. If there is a suitable project, it will not delay her filming. Just coordinate the schedule a little. You just learn from Garsha. I will say hello to him. Lyman said to Eva with a smile on his face. Watch more. Ask if you don't understand. In fact, the work of producing is not difficult, and you can get started quickly with someone to guide you. I will, Eva said confidently. After that, she went to help prepare the crew. Before filming began, Eva had done her homework on the project Juno and had a certain familiarity with all aspects. After all, she saw the changes in the script several times at the first time, so how could she not know where the focus of the filming was? Just when Firefly allocated some resources to Juno, the Prestige was still harvesting box office revenue in the schedule market. It also received $5.85 million on Monday of the following week. This trend can only be said to be good, with no collapse or counter-trend growth. However, the distributors of Blue Butterfly Pictures are quite satisfied with this, and Lyman is also following suit to use Fox's overseas distribution network to open up theater markets in other regions. In this way, the Prestige, which is likely to recover its costs at the box office, has also made some Warner executives unable to sit still. Facts have proved that the combination of Nolan and Christian Bale is still a very effective money-making tool. September 19th. When Lyman was checking the progress of the project in his office, Mays came in and reported, "Boss, someone is coming from Warner. Do you want to meet him?" "Oh, who is it?" Lyman thought. Sure enough, he couldn't keep his cool. Of course, if it were him, he might not keep his cool either. Watching the Prestige sell at the box office and predicting the possible profits, how could the Batman project, which is also created by the same main creator and more likely to succeed, be held back forever? The head of the production department, Johnson Campbell, has called to inquire. It's him. Lyman nodded lightly. He was also busy with this matter some time ago. Yes, he has been there several times. After replying to the boss, Mays immediately called the front desk to let them pay attention to Johnson's arrival. Johnson Campbell was indeed very concerned about this matter. The failure of Superman brought about a series of chain reactions. Now Warner has finally silenced the shareholders, and naturally it is more cautious about the production of the project. It is said that Warner is a big family with a big business, which is indeed true, but a big family with a big business also has many people. When there are many people, it is impossible to have only one voice. When it comes to power and profit, every investor or shareholder behind the scenes cannot remain silent. Especially when the company fails, it is even more necessary to speak out, to maintain a sense of presence. They are like a bunch of leeches living on the giant Warner. They don't know much about the filming of the project, but it does not prevent them from sucking blood and yearning for more and better blood sources. It was just over 10 minutes. Kyosn drove to Firefly. Unfortunately, the talks still did not go smoothly. In other words, Lyman thought Warner had thought it through, but who knew that they were still clinging to the past conditions and polite words such as sincerity. Today is different from the past, and Firefly's not easy to talk to. Lyman quickly ended the unnecessary negotiations. It was also more than 10 minutes. KYOSEN came out of the building indifferently. His mood was complicated, and he had experienced a lot, so even his expression was calm. Lemon's gentle but unhesitating smile still lingered in his mind. He didn't hate or blame. Business dealings are never warm and affectionate. The reason why they are here today is that Warner Bros. Misjudged the toughness or tenacity of its rivals. In this matter, we can only say that Warner Bros. Shouldn't have introduced a producer like Firefly with too much say from the beginning. If it was Legendary Pictures in the original time and space, with poor production capabilities and an investment bank with a Wall Street background, Warner Bros. Could do whatever it wanted. Of course, after Legendary Pictures ended the cooperation period, it decisively threw itself into the arms of Universal. In KYOSEN's opinion, Warner Bros. Now has two options: either sacrifice its interests and agree to save the decline of DC Comics, or simply don't talk about it and wait for the contract to expire. It's like wanting to shoot but hesitating. Although Warner Bros. Also has concerns. On the one hand, it is to affirm the achievements of Nolan and Christian Bale and other main creators. If they don't win them over first, they will inevitably fall into a passive position. On the other hand, Warner Bros. Also regrets it a little. Chapter 698 Extra. Subscribe, vote. KYOSEN recalled the recent discussions within Warner, and he was also very emotional. In the absence of sufficient cinema resources, Firefly was too united. Just like there was no way to intervene in the acquisition, Firefly was a one-man show. As long as Lemon didn't nod, it wouldn't be a big deal to poach the management. Besides, Warner didn't have more favorable conditions to poach. They already had people in positions with some real power. If they poached people, would they just serve them? Isn't it realistic? Well, let's go back and continue to discuss it. Who made him just a senior executive of the production department? He didn't have complete control over his department, so how could he develop a project like Batman? Just when KYOSEN was running errands for him and was depressed about not having much decision-making power, Joseph knocked on the office door and reported some work to Lemon. It was mainly about the Prestige. Lemon raised his head and listened slowly. In fact, it was some plans for additional screenings that Lyman had communicated with the cinema, and he needed his consent. Point: this weekend, the number of screens showing the Prestige will increase to 3,100. Blue Butterfly Pictures is already preparing for the copies. After hearing this, Lemon said with a smile, "Isn't this expected? Cinema chains are much easier to deal with than the big six. For the sake of profit, they are more likely to make the most correct choice." "Boss," Joseph said easily, "this wave of increased cinema resources should be able to stabilize the subsequent screening format, but they will still give priority to the big six. After all, there are not many choices in the September schedule." "Haha, of course I know, but," Lemon couldn't help laughing, "don't you forget the old story of New Line. New Line spent more than 10 years laying the foundation, but relying on continuous small cost profits and good production output, it soon became the new favorite of the cinema market. If it hadn't failed later and couldn't provide profits to cinemas, it would have been able to compete with the big six during the schedule. As long as the movie has market prospects, cinemas are still easier to talk to." Let's turn our attention to the day when the first weekend results of The Prestige are released. It won the weekly box office championship directly, and the attendance rate was not bad, and it was in the September schedule. It was hard for this performance not to attract the attention of the theaters. The chain theaters led by Emperor Entertainment and AMC certainly could not sit idly by and watch the film's revenue slip away. They soon agreed to expand the scale of the film's release. In other words, adding more screens can make more money in terms of market data. There is room for expanding profits. Los Angeles, Emperor Entertainment branch. Oster sat in the boss chair, sorted out his thoughts a little, and soon picked up the phone to call Lyman, the president of Blue Butterfly Pictures. When the call was connected, he heard the other end say, "What's up, buddy? You are always so direct." Of course, regarding the cooperation with the Prestige, after discussion, we decided to expand the scale of the film's release starting from Wednesday this week, so there are some details in the contract that need to be determined. In addition, the copy needs to be prepared in advance. Oster also said directly, "Oh, go on, we will cooperate." In terms of the screen canvas, it will be expanded to 3,100 and will last for at least 3 weeks. In addition, the share of the screening will be increased for each chain theater. Oster simply listed a few numbers, which were adjustments they were accustomed to. For some movies with more potential, more resources need to be invested. From the perspective of the theater chain, this is a choice made based on market feedback. It is an effective arrangement to win more box office, not for friendship or something like that. And for the studio, this is indeed a very gratifying thing. Everyone knows that the amount of resource investment is very intuitive to represent the market box office. Of course, this is a win-win situation. If the box office is high, everyone can share the money more easily. Who doesn't want to get more profits? Then, Oster habitually concluded, for any profitable movie, Emperor Entertainment always welcomes it with open arms. If there is no problem, the day after tomorrow, our people will come to help transport the copies. Well, no one will refuse to make money, Lyman replied. Although Firefly still has a less than enthusiastic relationship with the cinemas, it is not a small shrimp that can be ignored. A studio that produces 10 projects a year has already left the ranks of small studios. Who would have the heart to deliberately ignore such a growing cash cow? Moreover, the cinemas are not monolithic, and many independent cinema operators together are also a considerable force. Moreover, Blue Butterfly Pictures has long had a certain North American distribution capability, and communication and cooperation with the cinemas is not a problem. The only thing that is rare is the priority and details of cooperation. As we all know, the contract sharing ratio that the 6 major first-line projects can get in the cinemas is always more favorable than that of other studios. On the contrary, for small and medium-sized costs, everyone is at a similar level. However, in this regard, Blue Butterfly Pictures is not very jealous. They think the real difference should be the thickness of resources. For example, schedule selection, resource priority, such as the geographical location of the cinema, the arrangement of screening time and the amount of publicity content within the cinema. These details are what many independent studios really value and strive for. For the same movies, the 6 major studios use the best theaters and show them at the best time. The ticket sellers also actively recommend them. On the contrary, other studios do not have this convenience, and they cannot even squeeze in during the summer and Christmas. Such treatment is particularly troublesome. Moreover, if the box office performance of the film begins to weaken, the speed of reduction is faster than others. This difference is also common. Of course, the theaters are not stupid. None of them is soft-hearted. If the projects of the 6 major studios fail, they still have to make room. Therefore, what Blue Butterfly Pictures needs to do is to gradually deepen the cooperation between the two parties, use interests and production levels, to continuously improve similar priorities, and strive for better resource tendencies. This is definitely a long process, but every step can get corresponding discounts. After talking about the prestige, Oster changed the topic. Or with the current production of Firefly, they are still somewhat competitive. What other screening plans do you have recently? We will talk about it in detail at that time. It's a bit early to say now. However, this answer also indirectly shows that Firefly does still have projects. Oster believed that with their current reputation and gradually accumulated advantages, the output of projects would definitely increase. This is an inevitable process. Unless Firefly is willing to be a small studio, then of course there is no need to pay attention to the output. Because for theaters, a stable studio that can provide enough projects in a year should be given some special treatment. Otherwise, why should they bear too much pressure and risk? Okay, I will fax the contract details later, and you can sign and send it back. After everything was made clear, Oster stopped pestering and hung up the phone neatly. At this time, Emperor Entertainment still attached some importance to Firefly's ideas. After all, their company's involvement with the 6 majors is not very deep. Moreover, it is foreseeable that relying on the momentum of several directors, some aspects of Firefly have great profit potential. Just like DreamWorks at the beginning, there are always projects that can make big money. The reason why more resources have not been added and priority recognition is that this model has certain disadvantages. Firefly, like DreamWorks, is not very stress resistant. Once there is a problem with the production of a project, the capital chain will be broken. At that time, it would probably be difficult to survive. As the saying goes, when one prospers, all prosper, and when one suffers, all suffer. Disney's profit model that does not rely on box office, but on offline and surrounding markets is not so easy to learn. Warner, Universal, and Paramount, which have multiple channels and multiple models for sinking profits, cannot be caught up in a day or two. Compared with them, Firefly still has a long way to go. For now, it can only be said that there are certain advantages in production, but it is not enough to have a big impact. However, such results are also very exciting. People always have to look at the long term. It depends on whether it can still form its own pattern and go further. If you are that lucky, it is not without a chance. Immediately, the additional screening contracts of Emperor Entertainment, AMC and other theaters were quickly approved. Chapter 699 Factional Interests, Subscriptions, Votes. Chief, they didn't agree. In the office, Berrymere looked at KOSEN and said the expected answer. Of course, there were still expectations. When expectations were dashed, the whole person's mood became bad. It was not for anything else, but inexplicable irritation. However, irritation was useless. After a while, he suppressed his emotions and reason returned to his mind. Berrymere said, "Do they disagree, or don't want to talk? The conditions we offered did not satisfy their appetite. Then they are willing to talk." Berrymere ordered with a sullen face, "Send a notice, and hold a meeting in the afternoon. All department level executives will attend." The management of various departments of Warner soon received the news of the meeting. Meetings, everyone is familiar with it. Regular meetings at least once a week are common. But in such a situation, it is basically no secret what to discuss. The Batman project always needs a policy to be implemented. "Brian, there will be a meeting at the headquarters in the afternoon." Similar rumors soon reached the ears of Jaden Bryan, the director of HBO TV. "Got it." After a few words of small talk, Bryan hung up the phone. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the huge conference room gradually became popular. However, those who found their seats were a little absent-minded, exchanging glances with each other, and occasionally communicating a few times. Everyone present knew that Firefly had discussed the Batman project with its own company for many days, but still could not reach a consensus. And today may be the most publicized discussion. Therefore, this group of core members of Warner basically understood that a decision was needed. After all, everyone saw the performance of the Prestige. The main seat was still empty. KOSEN, who was sitting in the middle position on the right, looked at these people with different positions calmly. At this moment, he suddenly had a feeling that he admired the executive Mr. Mir. There are so many voices, so many people of all kinds, standing here, but they cannot be well controlled. Or the more capable people are, the more they need, and it is difficult to make them obey. Sometimes, he is also a headache. When KOSEN saw Jaden Bryan and the executives of the DC department gathered together, he couldn't help thinking so. Suddenly, there was a greeting at the door. Berrymere waved his hand, signaled something, and sat in the main seat. It was hard to guess what was going on with his calm face. Since he entered here, people kept standing up and greeting him. For a moment, all the other unnecessary voices disappeared. Jaden Bryan had not calmed down since he said something bad about Warner Pictures to the board of directors. He really felt that it was a bad move to make enemies with Firefly. If it weren't for the good performance of the film and television department and its great power, he would have asked the board of directors to continue to put pressure on it, even if it was a change of leader. Of course, he thought so, but he knew it was difficult to do. After all, to be honest, HBO was definitely not as important as Warner Pictures in the hearts of the major shareholders of the board of directors, and he was not the only one who had the final say on the TV station. In other words, nominally, the heads of several of their companies were at the same level, but Warner relied on the film business to grow step by step to become the media group it is today. In terms of priority, it is impossible to change the direction of resource allocation all at once. But Bryan was still a man with his own ideas. He thought to himself, if the filming of the Batman project could be promoted at this time, wouldn't it further ease the rigid relationship with Firefly? Not to mention the loss of some project revenue. Even if there were uncompromising ideas, they had to be promoted. As for how Warner Pictures was, it had nothing to do with the TV station. He only had to be responsible for the business under his charge. It would be best if the performance was excellent enough to exceed the film revenue. This was the most favorable choice for him. You know, even when the two companies were hostile to each other, HBO and Firefly still cooperated in a friendly manner in The Walking Dead in accordance with the agreement. In any case, that was what they were fighting for, and they also left a good relationship. After all, if they won the fight against Firefly, it would be fine. If they failed, or if they were deadlocked like now, it would not be good for the TV station at all. Why should they do it? The butt determines the head, and interests are above everything else. What Brian did was just thinking, based on the gains and losses of the TV station, and he did not feel the direct pressure brought by the growing strength of Firefly. Therefore, he quickly found Anthony, a senior executive of the DC department who had the same idea. This person was in charge of the development and operation of DC Comics. On weekdays, he mostly maintained the brand image and explored the surrounding areas of the image. In general, his position in this large group was rather awkward. He was neither very important nor insignificant. However, there was one thing he recognized very much, that is, to further promote the image of DC through screen works. In this regard, he initially stood on the side of the film department. After all, the filming of the project could not be circumvented by the film department. That was their job. Anthony could only make suggestions, and could hardly intervene in the specific filming. But now, he was angry about the failure of the film industry. Superman failed. Catwoman also failed. It was obviously a good hand, but it felt wrong. Even the successful Batman was invested and filmed by Firefly. How could he not have any ideas about this? For him, developing DC means an increase in his voice and a real increase in performance. He was more anxious than many people when the project development was not going well. Being impatient means being more courageous in making judgments. In the United States, class and capital have long penetrated all aspects of society. Performance is Anthony's capital for advancement, and it is also a guarantee that he will not be eliminated. Warner's speed of replacing management is certainly not bad, and it is still difficult to do things. Therefore, when Brian found him, he quickly expressed his position and definitely voiced his support for easing and making peace with Firefly. As an executive who can get to his current position, he will certainly not give up his desire for fame and fortune. The cause and effect, the pros and cons, are all known by many smart people who have experienced it. Is the Batman thing really a simple matter of conflict of interest? In fact, it is not. On the one hand, Firefly is threatening. On the other hand, the film industry is really hesitant about the development of DC. Perhaps it is a failure due to some stupid moves, or with the same investment of resources. Series of movies such as Harry Potter are obviously more profitable, and it is difficult to choose. Sometimes, too many choices are not a good thing. After encountering setbacks, it is easy to dispel part of the enterprising spirit. But it was hard for Anthony to accept such a trend. He, like Berrymere, had contributed a lot to the promotion of the DC project. What was it for? To make his own business more valued by the group, to achieve more results, and to have a better future for the business. What is a perfect match? This is it. In comparison, Jaden Brian has more selfish motives. As soon as the discussion started, there were several factions with biased speeches. Among them, everyone with their own thoughts inevitably fell into disputes and wrangling. There were those who were hesitant, those who supported/opposed, those who spoke fiercely, and those who didn't care. There were different positions and attitudes, but it was certain that the Batman project had become a real problem that needed to be faced. And it was very urgent. When Anthony made a high-profile speech, agreeing to continue to cooperate with Firefly, and to make more concessions when necessary, and that DC might encroach on internal resources, other people were suddenly shocked. Not everyone is looking forward to the rise of DC. Or does Warner Pictures have no projects worth supporting? A studio must have a focus on each project. The higher the treatment in this aspect, the more it will sacrifice in other aspects. then the production will inevitably make some vested interests feel uncomfortable, because it is their interests that will be lost. Who will worry if the knife does not fall on the neck? On the field, several people had gloomy faces and listened to some people's agreement with the DC plan. Of course, there were others who kept silent and just watched the development of the situation. No matter what the final conclusion was, it would not affect them. Many times, when two parties quarrel, there is always a lack of neutral parties. Chapter 700. For oneself, for the public. Please subscribe, vote. Barry Mayer listened to the endless arguments below. It would be impossible to say that his heart was as calm as his facial expression. A group of people who were calculating for their own benefit, but who were reluctant to make decisions that were not in their best interest, really annoyed him. But working in a big company, this was a daily routine. He didn't feel really angry when he got angry. In other words, as a qualified professional manager who had experienced many ups and downs, Barry Mayer had seen uglier things than this. What was the point of fighting for power? Some people directly poached the company's talents and used their power for personal gain. In this regard, the most famous one was Columbia Pictures. On September 25, 1989, Sony announced that it would acquire Columbia Pictures for $3.4 billion and assume Columbia's $1.6 billion in collateral debt. After the acquisition was completed, it set the highest record in the history of Japanese corporate mergers. But movies have always been the pride of Americans, and the involvement of Japanese companies caused panic in public opinion. Morita repeatedly stated that this is not an invasion of Japanese culture. We don't want to send Japanese managers to Columbia, and adhered to Sony's motto of global localization, emphasizing that the key to success after the acquisition is not to highlight the characteristics of Japanese companies to ensure that the acquired company maintains American characteristics. On the second day, after announcing the acquisition of Columbia, Sony announced the acquisition of Google Peters Entertainment for $200 million and hired two partners of the company, famous film producers Peter Google and John Peters, as co-chairmen of the acquired Columbia Pictures. It was an explanation to the American people and Hollywood. Then, these two, either indirectly or directly, and most of the management in the middle acquiesced, started a very indecent eating. The result is that the loss in the first quarter is fine. After all, it is a running-in period, and the second quarter even created an exaggerated loss of $3.1 billion US. The entire Wall Street and Hollywood are shocked how they can lose so much money. $3.1 billion. The acquisition price is only $3.4 billion plus $1.6 billion assets and debts. If Sony is not a big family, this acquisition case would be a huge burden. In the meantime, while Sony was guaranteeing Columbia's autonomy, Peter Goober and John Peters also controlled several production companies. Through outsourcing and co-production, the funds swallowed up could not be traced at all. Because the film and television industry is too easy to account, the losses and expenses during filming are not easy to check. It's like a straw hat worth hundreds of thousands, a special suit worth millions. Who knows how much it is worth? It's just a random statement. In this regard, Warner has a lot of say, and it often does this when it pits its allies. Similar routines can be guessed by smelling the smell. Compared with this, a little internal contradiction is nothing. No matter what, everyone is dedicated to serving the public, and it is completely tenable in terms of justice. The discussion continued. At this moment, Barry Mayer coughed, and the atmosphere that was just lively suddenly became quiet, and everyone's eyes were focused on him. Barry Mayer glanced at them, neither expressing a positive intention nor denying it, and just casually asked, "What if we cooperate with Firefly?" For such a question, the leader of the opposition would of course remain silent. But the meeting room soon regained its enthusiasm for discussion. Then, Kyo-sen had to stand up and speak. Among these people, he was the one who communicated the most with Firefly. Although he had not expressed his opinions much before, no one cared about what he thought. Perhaps even he was very tired and didn't want to say anything. Therefore, he just analyzed that there were premises and foundations for cooperation, and the specifics were still the division of interests. Barry Mayer nodded, acknowledging his statement, and still asked slowly, "They want to participate in the North American distribution. What do you want to say?" In this regard, Anthony naturally hoped to raise the banner of DC as soon as possible, consolidate his position, and ensure the department's profits, but this did not mean that he had to follow the ideas of Firefly. He was not too involved with Firefly, so how could he agree to such extreme conditions? Cooperation is cooperation, but it should not harm Warner's interests too much. His starting point was still to consider the company. North American distribution cannot be given. If possible, in addition to the box office share, overseas revenue can be given more, Anthony thought. Kyosen heard this and shook his head secretly. It was because he often contacted Firefly that he understood that if he did not cut enough profits from the project to feed them, Firefly would never agree. Could it be that in this situation, there are still people who don't know what Lyman is up to? Who would work so hard to get a sip of soup? Or discuss the offline share? Someone else answered actively, no. However, it is difficult for those who oppose to give a better reason to disagree. The reason for this is that the mystery of the blade was successful. The profits in hand are enough to cover up many imperfect arrangements. If it was a failure like Superman, they would definitely have more confidence to oppose. Anthony glanced at Brian with the corner of his eye and found that he was still sitting there like nothing happened. He immediately cursed him as an old fox in his heart. At this point, the situation is very clear. It is difficult to object, so he had to agree to cooperate. In fact, Berry was also gradually leaning towards this, but he needed to coordinate the general direction among the different voices. Kyosen. Berry suddenly shouted. Kyosen Campbell stood up immediately. This matter is still in your hands, and you will lead the preliminary negotiations. Berry continued, this time, you can appropriately raise the offline revenue share to test Firefly's attitude. Kyosen had no objection. After the meeting, let's not talk about how everyone reacted, whether they were disappointed, fortunate or happy. However, Kyosen, who had just returned to his office, soon welcomed a visit from Brian. Although they belonged to different jurisdictions, their influence within the group was much higher than his. Therefore, Kyosen was very polite. As for Brian's purpose, he still hoped to make friends with Firefly on this matter, and then increase the exchanges in TV series. HBO needs good dramas, and Firefly can shoot good dramas, which brings many benefits to the TV station. It's that simple. In his imagination, the two should be closer. Firefly can't control the TV network anyway, so there is no need to worry about threats. So it's a win-win situation and HBO can win more business. Why not work hard? However, Anthony is more troublesome. He didn't show more urgency, which made him a little surprised. Then, he didn't know whether the concession conditions could impress Firefly. This is also something that needs to be questioned. What he needs to do now is to communicate with Johnson, or to mix some private goods into the negotiations. For example, cooperate on another TV series. Anyway, if Batman can smoothly enter the preparation stage, it means that the two sides have a fairly close contact again, and can cooperate on movies and TV series. It's hard to say whether it will succeed or not, but it's enough to reveal a similar meaning. I hope that when there are new drama ideas, HBO will be noticed and paid more attention when selecting the broadcasting platform, so that his good intentions will not be in vain. Just as Warner was preparing to increase the stakes, in addition to increasing the screen size of the Prestige, the cinema chain naturally had no shortage of new competitors joining in the new week. The biggest impact was of course not the blockbuster The Prestige, which was still showing in its strongest cycle, but other works that were not so good. To be fair, The Prestige can only be said to be qualified, not to mention that the subject matter also limits its market. Even if more resources are added, it is to quickly earn a wave of box office, which consumes more potential. On Wednesday, it earned $8.75 million in a single day. Not only did it not fall, but it also increased by 18% compared with the previous few days due to the increase in resources. It is also the most proven rebound performance under this situation. From September 15th to September 22nd, the North American box office of The Prestige exceeded $60 million in total, which also made the distributors of Blue Butterfly Pictures begin to predict where the film will end up. But even the most confident one still gave an answer of no more than $140 million, and this is still including overseas regions. After the next week, Fox began to release the film overseas, but the performance in various places was not good. Even in Nolan's hometown of the United Kingdom, it only earned more than $7 million after 5 days of screening. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.